Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Oren here. I just wanted to come on here and introduce myself. If you don't know me, I run a couple pages. I run one on Instagram and on TikTok, making animal education as well. And today I wanted to put together a compilation of all the videos that I made in the past year and a half since I started this whole content creation journey. And that way you can watch them all in one place if you so desired. But I hope you guys enjoy the video and stay tuned for more updates.
After TikTok almost getting banned, I had an idea. So I watch a lot of people like, Casual Geographic and Lindsay Nicole, right? It's my turn to step into the ring. So we're going to start that by introducing the Okapi. And if you don't know what this thing is, I can't say I don't blame you. But just know this is the same animal that Kevin Hart calls a deer bruh in his comedy special. Because it looks like a cross between a zebra, a deer, and a giraffe, right? Well, funny thing you should say that because it's the closest living relative to the giraffe. And they're only found in one place in the world, the Ituri rainforest in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The fact that this wannabe zebra wasn't discovered until 1901 absolutely baffles my mind. In the wild, they eat a variety of toxic plants as well as charcoal from lightning-struck trees in Baghdad. Couple last minute facts here. Their only predator is a leopard. They have oil in their skin to protect them from rain, and they're usually shy. If any animal family got an award for best adaptability, I would say it has to go to the bears. For instance, there's the brown bear, the hypercarnivorous polar bear, not just one, but two species of black bear, the termite-eating bedhead known as the sloth bear, and the bear that people continuously think is just a man in a costume. No, that's a sun bear. But there's another bear species that might surprise you. This is the spectacled bear, the only bear species found in South America in the Andes Mountains. The spectacled bear is the only surviving member of the subfamily Tremarctinae. And if you don't know what that is, that subfamily belongs to the short-faced bears. And following in its ancestors' footsteps, the spectacled bear is the largest land carnivore in that part of the world. But only 5% of their diet is actually meat. Most of the time they're just eating plants. Occasionally they will go after animals such as llamas and tapirs. Because these bears have such a varied diet, sometimes they'll eat agricultural products such as sugarcane and corn, and they're also seen as a threat to livestock. Because of this, along with habitat loss and poaching, they're classified as vulnerable. A lot of people have a fear of piranhas due to misconceptions in mainstream media, but that's not the point of this video. The real question is, what do piranhas fear? That title, my friends, would go to the Amazon river dolphin, also known as the pink river dolphin. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are asking, why are pink river dolphins pink? Well, there's a couple leading theories, with one of them being the capillaries under their skin. And to explain what capillaries are, they're delicate blood vessels that carry the blood throughout your body. But maybe that's an oversimplification. If anyone's got any more information, leave it to me in the comments. Another reason why these Coca-Cola swimming cetaceans might be pink is because of a little thing called carotenoids. You see, carotenoids are organic pigments that can be found in food that give certain animals a different color of their skin, and it can vary from orange, red, yellow, and in some cases, the iconic pink that we see in pink river dolphins, which are suggested to get their pigmentation from eating things such as crustaceans and other aquatic dwelling animals in their environment. And even other animals such as flamingos get their pink from eating things such as brine shrimp. And yes, even humans can be affected by carotenoids. And in this instance, a woman in China ate too many of one food in particular that turned her skin orange. You want to guess what it was? Carrots. Yep, she ate too many carrots and her skin turned orange. The more you know, right? Looking back now, I think I said it wrong. It's carotenoids, not carotenoids. Out of all the animals that I've reviewed in my species highlights so far, this one looks the most normal. And at first you might think it's an iguana, but no, it's not an iguana, or a lizard at all actually. Let me explain. This is a tuatara, and it belongs to the order Rhynchocephalia, and yes, it is not a lizard, and they're actually more closely related to snakes than they are lizards. And despite what Adam Sandler might tell you, tuataras are not native to Florida. They're actually native to New Zealand, despite what the movie Leo would tell you. One thing that the movie does get right, though, is that they can live to 60 years in most cases, and in some individuals, they can live up to 100 years. Another cool fact about these living fossils is the fact that they have 3 eyes. Now, you can't quite see it right here, and you mostly see it in younger individuals, is the fact that this parietal eye actually lets them absorb ultraviolet light and produce vitamin D in their system. Fair caution to tale to all those baby tuataras out there, like this bird, you could be eaten by your own parents. Whenever people think about living fossils, I'm pretty sure the first thing that comes to mind is the infamous horseshoe crab. But if you grew up playing Animal Crossing, or the famous Fossils and Archaeology mod for Minecraft, you already know where I'm going with this. That's right, today we're going to be talking about the coelacanth. Although it was thought these old geezers died out with the dinosaurs, a living specimen was actually found off the coast of South Africa in 1938. Coelacanths belong to a group of low-fin fish, which means they're more closely related to lungfish and tetrapods than they are ray-fin fish, aka every other fish that is not a lungfish. Something I don't see a lot of conversations about is the fact that there's 2 distinct species of coelacanth, one of them being the West Indian Ocean coelacanth that is found near the Comoro Islands in South Africa, and the other being the Indonesian coelacanth. And you might see the excess of fins on a coelacanth's body. Well, that actually allows for omnidirectional movement, and they've even been seen doing headstands. And for any fishermen out there who might want to get a taste of a coelacanth, just know they have an oily substance in their bodies which makes them absolutely disgusting and foul to eat. Would you believe me if I told you there was an animal out there that had the back of a bear, the hind legs of a hyena, the stubby limbs of a cow, the face of a moose, the tail of a goat, and the horns of a wildebeest? Probably not, but I assure you it is real. And I'm talking about toucans. Other than the fact that their babies are absolutely adorable, these animals are actually the national animal of Bhutan. Toucans can be found in mountain ranges in Bhutan, Burma, India, and China. And when I tell you they're built for mountainous terrain, I mean it. These animals can be found at altitudes of 3,300 feet all the way to 14,800 feet. And considering the fact that I've had the pleasure of seeing toucans in real life, they are a lot bigger than you think, with males reaching between 660 to 770 pounds and females reaching between 550 and 660 pounds. But some males can reach almost 1,300 pounds. Yeah, because of their massive size and aggressiveness, only a few predators will take them on, including bears, wolves, leopards, and owls. There are 4 known species of toucan, being the Bhutan toucan, the Mishmi toucan, the golden toucan, and the Sichuan toucan. Now that's what I'm talking about. If there is an animal that symbolized the iconic American Wild West, I would say it has to be the American Mustang. These horses were brought to the Americas by Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century, mainly serving as pack animals and mounts. But what if I told you these wild horses are not true wild horses? Because these emancipated equines came from domestic horses, they are feral, not wild. So then, what is a truly wild horse? The title would belong to none other than the Przewalski's horse, the only true wild horse species. Przewalski's horses have a couple of key differences, being shorter, stockier, and smaller than domestic horses, and also having 66 chromosomes rather than the 64 we see in domestic horses. These stocky ponies also made one of the most incredible comebacks from extinction that I have ever seen. Due to hunting pressure and agricultural expansion, it was thought that the Przewalski's horse went extinct in the wild during the 1960s. That is, however, until 1996. With only 12 individuals being in captivity and 1 game of Sweet Home Alabama later, the horses now have a population of over 2,000. Some of these animals being introduced into Chernobyl, aka the Fallout Zone. I think engineers don't get a lot of credit for what they do. No, not those kinds of engineers. This kind of engineer. But you might be thinking, that's just a beaver. Well, beavers are one of many animal species that are considered ecosystem engineers. An ecosystem engineer is an animal that directly affects its environment, such as beavers building dams. And because of this, beavers have the capability to create ponds, lakes, marshes, and wetlands for other animals to call home. Another example of an ecosystem engineer is the African savanna elephant, since it has the capability to knock down trees in its environment, making more way for grass and other animals to graze on it. Even the biggest animals, including the blue whale, have the capability to be ecosystem engineers. You see, whenever a whale dies, its carcass falls to the bottom of the ocean, providing food and shelter for countless animal species at the ocean floor.
Majority of animals that are ecosystem engineers are also keystone species, but not all keystone species are ecosystem engineers. Let me explain. You see, keystone species are animals that help bring balance to their environment, but that doesn't mean necessarily shaping their environment, such as wolves that are predators and help control animal populations. Another example of keystone species are pollinators, which are animals that help pollinate their plants in the environment, such as bees and hummingbirds. And for those animals that want to live the best of both worlds of being pollinator and predator, look no further than the Ethiopian wolf. You know, crocodilians have really stood the test of time, being one of the oldest animal groups in the modern day, but they haven't changed much even since their early days. Even though they've been around since the days of the dinosaurs, it's suggested that they reached an evolutionary equilibrium. Although their overall body plan has stayed the same, they have diversified, ranging from crocodiles, alligators, caimans, and even the lesser-known gavialids such as the gharial. But today we're going to be talking about a different gavialid, also known as the Tomistoma or the false gharial. Gharials and Tomistomas are morphologically similar, but as you can see above, there are a couple of differences in their anatomy. Today, Tomistomas are found in peninsular Malaysia, which includes the islands of Sumatra and Borneo. For a long time, we didn't really know much about what Tomistomas ate, other than fish because of their teeth, but now we have a better idea. Now know that they'll eat other animals such as birds, deer, small mammals, and even monkeys that look like they're about to sell you a trade for a stick for 64 emeralds. And if you think that you're safe from these acupuncture animals just because of their fish-eating teeth, you would be wrong, because there was a study conducted in 2019 that between the years of 2010 and 2019, 31 attacks were reported in Indonesia, with 10 of them being deaths. If you didn't know, today marks the 26th anniversary of the PBS Kids TV show Zoboomafoo, starring the Kratt brothers. And in honor of the show's anniversary, today we're going to be talking about the little lemurs who like to bounce and play, the cockerel shifaka. Cockerel shifakas are native to the northwestern part of Madagascar, living in dry, deciduous forest. Shifakas can't actually run on all fours, so they hop around from place to place, also known as pogoing. Not only do they pogo around, but they can also jump from tree to tree with absolute precision, being able to turn their bodies mid-air to land. These lemurs' diets actually change from season to season, with the wet season being immature leaves, flowers, dead wood, and bark, and the dry season being mature leaves and buds. But as you may know, the star of the show, Jovian, aka Zoboomafoo, had a personal favorite, garbanzo beans, aka chickpeas. Here's a special thanks to the Kratt brothers. Thank you both for inspiring my love of animals and animal conservation.
This is a buffalo, right? Wrong! This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're talking about the difference between bison and buffalo. So, what do we consider bison? Let's go over their characteristics. Bisons have short horns, shaggy fur, and a hump on their back. There are two members of the bison family, with the first being the American bison, and the second being the Wisent, or the European bison. So although gaur are also called Indian bison, they are not true bison, and they're also not buffalo, so I'll save him for another time. But this is a true buffalo. True buffalo usually have longer horns, darker skin, and shorter fur, and can be found in Africa and Asia. In Asia, we can find the wild and domestic water buffalo, Tamaraw or the Mindoro dwarf buffalo, and lastly the mountain and lowland Anoas, which are the smallest bovine species in the world. And in Africa, we have the Black Death itself, the Cape buffalo. So now you know the difference between bison and buffalo.
So a mountain goat is a goat, right? Nope, you would be wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to be talking about how mountain goats are not goats. In order to explain, we have to delve into the Capernae family tree. Mountain goats are actually in their own genus, Oreamnos, which translates to mountain lamb. But surprise, surprise, they're not sheep either. Instead, their closest living relatives are chamois and takins. But chamois are known as goat antelopes and takins are known as new goats. I'm confused. And if you're still not convinced that they're not goats, how about we get down to the bone? And horns, I should say. In domestic goats, wild goats, and ibexes, they have thicker and heavier skulls with longer horns. Due to their environment, mountain goats actually have thinner and lighter skulls. I almost forgot to mention the Balearic cave goat. Yeah, this isn't a goat either. This is an anteater, right? Wrong. Then surely this is an anteater, right?
also wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to talk about the difference between aardvarks, pangolins, and true anteaters. I can't say I don't blame you guys because even Disney gets it wrong. While all three do in fact eat ants, aka are insectivores, they are not all anteaters. Let me explain. True anteaters are only found in the Americas, being part of the superorder Xenarthra, which include sloths and armadillos. Let's start with aardvarks. Aardvarks are also known as Cape anteaters or earth pigs or ant bears, but the truth is, they are not anteaters, pigs, or bears at all. Aardvarks are actually Afrotherians, which include elephants, elephant shrews, tenrecs, hyraxes, and even manatees and dugongs. But where do pangolins fall in the animal kingdom? Because they sure do look like anteaters, and they roll into balls like armadillos, so they must be Xenarthrans. The short answer is pangolins are their own unique thing, being the only mammals with scales in the entire world, but I bet you want the long answer. No, I'm not joking when I say this. They are most closely related to carnivorans, aka dogs, cats, and bears. So now you know the difference between aardvarks, anteaters, and pangolins. This is a panda, right? Wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today I'm going to be talking to you while I'm going after this bear's entire reputation. And no, I'm not saying that they're not bears, but they were always considered bears. Prior to 1985, both giant pandas and red pandas were considered their own thing. After scientific studies done in 1985, giant pandas were reclassified in the Ursidae family, aka the bears. So panda bear is technically accurate, but not the panda part. Well, what about red pandas? Well, these red rigbies are actually still in the family Luridae, being considered true pandas. You know, speaking of Rigby, closest living relative to red pandas are actually raccoons, so the term trash panda has a whole new meaning. So now you know the difference between red pandas and giant pandas, and the fact that raccoons are more pandas than panda bears will ever be. This is a black panther, right? Wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to be talking about what is classified as a black panther. So in order to be a black panther, you have to be a member of the big cats, aka the Panthera genus. So then, any big cat can be a black panther, right? Well, there's actually a second rule to be a black panther. You have to be a melanistic leopard or jaguar. So although there are pseudo-melanistic tigers that are almost black, they are not black panthers. And I hear you guys, what about mountain lions? Are they big cats? As it turns out, mountain lions are actually not big cats. And trust me, mountain lions aren't the only ones. Cheetahs suffer from this big cat misconception too, with both of them being in their own genus. But aren't there reported cases of melanistic cougars? There are reported cases, but they are not confirmed, and it is most likely a black jaguar. Yes, jaguars reside in the United States, with most cases being in Arizona. So, if you see a black panther, it could be a jaguar or a leopard. No, that's a great question. What are white panthers? So the same rule applies as before. To be a true panther, you have to be in the Panthera genus, aka the big cats. But there is one main difference. All 5 species of big cat can in fact be white panthers, with tigers, lions, leopards and jaguars, and snow leopards. But snow leopards are already white, so we don't have to worry about that. And although cougars are not actually panthers, there are leucistic cougars, so they're white panthers that aren't white panthers. And as for white cheetahs, there aren't any recorded cases. However, there are spotless cheetahs, so that's about as close as you're gonna get. Pink panthers are also a thing, technically, because there is such a thing as a strawberry leopard, which is a leopard with erythrism. And if we apply the same logic, golden tabby tigers are also pink panthers, I guess. This is a pachyderm, right? Wrong! This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to be talking about why elephants, rhinos, hippos, and tapirs are in fact not pachyderms. Well, they're not officially pachyderms, which can be a little confusing, so let me add some context. The term pachyderm is actually a combination of 2 Greek words, with pachy being thick and derma being skin. Because all 4 animal groups fit the description, they used to be classified in the now obsolete order known as Pachydermata. So the word pachyderm is still used in the modern day. However, these animals are not related. So where do they fit? So rhinos and tapirs are actually the only pachyderms that are truly related, but now being in the order Perissodactyla, or odd-toe ungulates along with horses. Hippos are now considered artiodactyls, or even-toed ungulates. But going even further, hippos are whipomorphs, a group of artiodactyls which include hippos and whales. And elephants are afrotherians, which include aardvarks, hyraxes, and manatees.
This is an antelope, right? Well, yes, but you're also wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to talk about the most confusing topic I've talked about so far. What is a true antelope? I've already discussed how pronghorn are not antelope and how they're actually giraffoids, but it's a little more complicated this time. All antelopes are bovids, yes, but some are caprines, being closer to goats and sheep. Some are bovines, more related to cows, and some are even their own thing. So the word antelope is actually a catch-all phrase describing a lot of animals in the bovid family that look similar. So then, who are the real antelopes? Well, there's only one subfamily that has true antelopes, which is Antilopinae. Not so fast. Not even all Antilopinae are true antelopes either. There's only one tribe that has true antelope, being Antilopini, but not even all Antilopini are true antelopes either. I promise you guys, I'm getting there, I swear. There are only 4 genera in the tribe Antilopini which are true antelope, with 3 of them being considered gazelles, with Gazella, Eudorcus, and Nanger, and the last genus being blackbugs, aka antelope. I don't think I ever want to look at taxonomy ever again after this.
But giraffes have horns, right? Wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to be talking about why giraffes do not have horns, but rather ossicones, and how they are not the same. Ossicones are not horns because they're covered in skin, not keratin. If they were covered in keratin, they would look a lot more like what we see in antelope. Okay, so then giraffes have 2 ossicones, right? Well, not exactly. Usually giraffes do have 2 ossicones, but in some males, there can be a 3rd ossicone, also known as the median ossicone. This is especially prevalent in the northern giraffe species, but the Rothschild variant can have up to 5 ossicones. So now that we've established that giraffes have ossicones, are there any other animals that have ossicones too? Yes, okapis actually have ossicones, but we only see them in males, because in females you usually see hair whorls or knobby bumps, which do not count as ossicones. This is a unicorn, right? Well, yes, but you could be wrong? This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to talk about what a unicorn would have to be from a scientific point of view. And since we're talking about living animals, Elasmotherium cannot be a contender. And to make our case, we're going to go off the description of a European unicorn, having 1 long spiral horn and mane, cloven hooves, and a long tail. And since horses don't have horns, and rhinos along with them being odd-toe ungulates, they cannot be unicorns. Well, then what about narwhals? I mean, they are artiodactyls. They have a spiral tusk that protrudes from the face, not a spiral horn. And although okapis are sometimes called forest unicorns, they have 2 ossicones, not a horn. Sala are also called Asian unicorns, but they have 2 straight horns, not 1 spiral horn. So if none of these animals are unicorns, what would be a unicorn? After looking at some speculative evolution art, the best case would be a bovine antelope. Even this can't be a unicorn because it has to be 1 spiral horn. So the best animal that would fit this description would be a kudu, but they have 2 horns. So bear with me when I say this. It would have to be a kudu with a genetic condition to only grow 1 horn. And for everyone who says unicorns who have to be white, it would have to be a leucistic or albino kudu as well. So a kudu is the closest thing we're ever going to get to a unicorn. Are hyenas dogs? Well, no. They're actually more cats? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation. So hyenas are actually part of the superfamily Herpestoidea, which includes fooses and mongooses. But that still doesn't explain how they're cats, so let me break it down a little bit further. So in the big picture, yes, all carnivorans are related, but the order Carnivora is divided into 2 suborders, Feliformia and Caeniformia. So Caeniformia, if you couldn't guess from the name, is all carnivorans that are more dog-like, including wolves, bears, pinnipeds, and even red pandas. Amphilophormia includes cat-like animals, which include hyenas. The relationship between hyenas and true cats are a little bit something like this. So imagine you get into a fight with your third cousin twice removed at a family reunion, and it gets personal. So that's how hyenas are more cats than they are dogs.
Wallaroos are hybrids, right? Wrong. This is Animal Misconceptions, and today we're going to be talking about why Wallaroos are in fact their own animal, not a hybrid. So when you get a cross between a kangaroo and a wallaby, you don't get a Wallaroo, you actually get a macropod hybrid. So then what's the difference between that and a Wallaroo? Well, Wallaroos can actually make a hybrid, not be made from a hybrid. And yes, Wallaroos can interbreed with both kangaroos and wallabies. So then, how do you tell kangaroos, Wallaroos, and wallabies apart? Well, the key is in the size. So just remember, if it's small, it's probably a wallaby. If it's medium, it's probably a Wallaroo. And if it's big and it wants to kick your ass, then it's probably a kangaroo. So now you know the difference between wallabies, Wallaroos, kangaroos, and macropod hybrids. So we know about mules, but what other equine crossbreeds are out there? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Equine Edition. First, let's talk about a hinny. It's the exact opposite of a mule, being a male horse and a female donkey. And then next are zebroids, which are any equine species crossed with a zebra. So a male zebra and a female horse make a zorse, and a male horse and a female zebra make a hebra. And it's the same thing with donkeys. A male zebra and a female donkey make a zonkey, but a male donkey and a female zebra make a donkra. And a zebra and a pony just make a zony. Speaking of ponies, a cross between a pony and a donkey make a mini mule. And a cross between a pony and a horse make a horse pony. And as for Przewalski's horses, there's only one crossbreed known, which is a Przewalski's horse crossed with a domestic horse.
If you didn't know, a wholphin is actually a cross between a dolphin and a false killer whale. But what other animal crossbreeds are out there that I haven't covered yet? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, All Other Animals Edition. First, let's talk about a Narluga, a cross between a narwhal and a beluga. They were actually finding their skulls in the 1990s before anyone ever saw one. And after that, we have coy wolves, coy dogs, and wolf dogs, which are all canine hybrids. Here's something you may not have known. Feral pigs are actually a cross between a domestic pig and a European boar. Because of climate change, we're now seeing polar bears, which are polar bear grizzly bear hybrids, also known as pizzly bears because they look pissed off all the time. A goat and a sheep can make a geep, camel and a llama make a cama, and a llama and alpaca make a lapaca. And while kangaroos and wallabies can't crossbreed, it's not called a Wallaroo, it's just called a macropod hybrid. Wallaroos are their own thing. There's also been a cross between an African and an Asian elephant, a white and black rhino, and grizzly and American black bears. So if you didn't know, there's a group of elephants in Africa that go into caves and go, salt mining? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Elephant Edition. On the border between Kenya and Uganda lies Mount Elgon, an extinct volcano. And in this dormant volcano, there's precious minerals that the elephants seek after. And there's actually a term for this, known as a mineral lick, but you've probably seen it with cows. The elephants go into the caves not only to get a salty treat, but also for their babies, as when an elephant is pregnant, it takes an extensive amount of resources to take care of the mother and the calf. And trust me, animals will go out of their way to get minerals one way or another. These elephantine excavators also spend up to 6 hours at a time in these caves in complete darkness. And looking at their family tree, it actually makes more sense than you think. Not only will elephants go in caves, they'll also swim in open ocean. And it's even been suggested that mammoths have done this too. The famous woolly mammoths of Wrangel Island are suggested to have swum out to the island, surviving all the way up until the time of the pyramids. So if you didn't know, feral pigs are an invasive species, being one of the most destructive in the United States. But what other invasive species are out there? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Invasive Species Edition. Invasive species can be plants or animals that are brought to a non-native region, causing a lot of problems for the other wildlife there. These problem animals can come in all shapes and sizes, such as the Asian citrus psyllid, which has infected more than half of all orange trees in Florida. Even the Great Lakes are not safe because of zebra mussels, which can damage boats, create toxic byproducts, and outcompete native mollusks by suffocating them. And Texas has its own problem due to exotic animal importation, such as axis deer and nilgai, also known as blue bulls, which can spread bovine fever to cattle. The invasive species problem has gotten so bad in the United States, the 12 most destructive species are also known as the Dirty Dozen. And no, not even island regions are safe because of brown tree snakes in Guam and Hawaii. And because invasive species outcompete native species, we're potentially seeing localized extinctions in America. And the reason why feral pigs are so well known is because of their destructiveness, also costing the US $1.5 billion in damage every year. So if you didn't know, okapis are actually not a cross between a horse and a giraffe. Well, what else should you know about okapis? It's time for your daily dose of education, Okapi Edition. These animals are only found in one place in the world, being the Democratic Republic of the Congo, most of the time eating or hiding from predators. Being the national animal, they don't just eat green, they are in fact about that green. Speaking of green, they eat a variety of toxic plants, but also charcoal from lightning-struck trees and bat guano. When it comes to the okapi stripes, it doesn't just help them camouflage. They're also known as follow-me stripes, helping their babies follow their moms through the rainforest. When it comes to the males, they are in fact into tall girls, as male okapis are smaller than female okapis, a rare occurrence in mammals. Male okapis can also be identified by their ossicones, the same thing that we see in giraffes. Speaking of, the closest living relative to an okapi is a giraffe. And lastly, the zebra wannabes were one of the last large mammals discovered, being found in 1901.
So if you didn't know, red wolves are the world's most endangered canine. Well, what else should you know about these red wolves? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Red Wolf Edition. When I say they're endangered, I mean they're very endangered, with only 20 individuals left in the wild, being in 2 reserves in North Carolina. They were once common throughout the southeast and central United States, but due to extreme predator control, their populations got decimated in the 20th century. While there have been reintroduction efforts, they haven't been successful because of 3 reasons. And the first one is the biggest threat: car collisions, as 20% of red wolves last year were killed by cars. Another big problem for these red wolves is coyote hybridization, as when the wolves were pushed out, coyotes moved in, and when the two started interbreeding, it diluted the wolves' genetic diversity. Which brings me to reason number 3. These wolves are often mistaken as coyotes to hunters, so they're killed on sight. And the sad truth is, the public is not in support of the reintroduction of the red wolf. But you can be by supporting the Wolf Conservation Center.
So if you didn't know, it is very illegal to touch a manatee. But why? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Manatee Edition. So first, let's get into the legality of it. They're protected under the Endangered Species Act of 1972, the Marine Mammal Act of 1973, and the Florida Manatee Sanctuary Act of 1978. But what do all these laws mean? Well, it boils down to this: it is illegal to harm, harass, kill, or bother a manatee in any form or fashion. The reason these laws were put into effect is because manatees are very sensitive mammals. Sometimes if a manatee gets too stressed, they'll experience cold stress syndrome, where they'll move out of warm waters into water that are too cold for them, which can be fatal. And when they get too accustomed to people, they'll get a little too close to boats, which are the #1 killer of manatees. So if you see a manatee, it is best advised to keep your distance, as if you touch one, you are facing 60 days in jail and a $500 fine. But if you do want to see manatees in all their blubbery glory, just know there are some reputable sanctuaries where you can see them from a safe distance. So if you didn't know, dodos may not actually be as stupid as we thought they were. So then, what is the truth behind these birds and their extinction? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Dodo Edition. These flightless birds get a bad reputation for being stupid, but here's the thing: dodos were not stupid, they were just oblivious to how destructive man could be. Because before the 17th century, dodos were living lavish on the island of Mauritius. And on this island, they had no natural predators, which made them lose their instinctual fear. That is, at least until the Dutch colonists arrived, bringing along with them rats, cats, pigs, even monkeys along with them on their ships. And because all of them viewed these island turkeys as a food source, it was everyone against the dodo. So by the late 1600s, the dodos had been hunted and eaten to extinction. And even though they're extinct now, they're actually being suspected to be more intelligent than we thought, being on the level of pigeons, as they have a comparable brain size. So dodos weren't stupid, they were just a little oblivious and too trustworthy of people. If only the dodos would have looked like this, they would have been fine.
So if you didn't know, quaggas were actually the first extinct animal to have their DNA analyzed. But what else should you know about these brown, half-striped equines? Time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Quagga Edition. The quaggas are actually a unique subspecies of plain zebra, being known for their half stripes and brown body. Because the word quagga used to actually refer to all zebras, the taxonomy of this animal can be a little confusing at times. And scientists couldn't use the specimens in museums, as taxidermists had to get creative because of the poor fossil record, using horse and donkey skulls. But how did they go extinct in the first place? These premium zebras were targeted for their special hides and meat, along with being competition to livestock as well as agricultural expansion. And at the end of the 19th century, the last wild quagga herd was exterminated. And the only known photos we have of this animal are of the London mare, a famous female quagga found in London who died in 1883.
What if I told you quaggas are coming back?
All thanks to a man known as Ronald Rao, who started the Quagga Project. With the goal in mind of selectively breeding 9 virtual zebras, the project started in 1987. And as you can tell, it seems to be working. And although true quaggas will never roam South Africa once again, their cousins' descendants will.
So if you didn't know, the late and famous crocodile hunter Steve Irwin didn't just catch crocodiles, he discovered a new turtle species. But what else should you know about the Irwin's turtle? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Irwin's Turtle Edition. So one day, 35 years ago, Steve Irwin and his father Bob Irwin were actually on the Burdekin River on a crocodile catching trip when they noticed something they had never seen before. So they caught a female freshwater turtle on a fishing line, but it didn't look like anything they ever seen. So Steve Irwin actually sent the pictures to John Cann, a turtle expert. And after verifying that it was in fact a new species, it was named the Irwin's turtle in his honor. Man, Steve Irwin really was in his prime back in the day. The Irwin's turtle actually breathes through its cloaca with a set of gill-like structures, having to live in oxygenated water. But with the construction of the Burdekin Dam, it's actually causing some problems for these turtles. So the construction of the dam has actually made the water quality go down, making it harder for these freshwater turtles to survive. But Steve Irwin's son, Robert Irwin, is actually helping with the cause. Robert Irwin is matching the legendary feats of his father, being the first person to hatch an Irwin's turtle. So if you didn't know, beetles make up roughly about 25% of all animal species, with 90,000 species being weevils. But what else should you know about weevils? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Weevil Edition. So no, weevils are not evil, but they are considered a pest, especially this one right here, the cotton boll weevil. So originally these proboscis parasites were found in Mexico, but due to agricultural expansion, they were found all the way in Alabama in 1915. And if you know anything about the South, cotton is a staple crop here, which is the boll weevil's favorite thing to target. So boll weevils lay their eggs on cotton plants, and the larvae actually eat the cotton, which can be very bad for farmers. And these buggy beetles have gotten so bad that South America is not safe either, as 90% of cotton crops in Brazil have been infected with boll weevils. Remember, I said there's 90,000, and they don't just affect cotton, they affect all kinds of crops. So if you don't want weevils to lay claim to your food, make sure you properly store it, as well as wiping your counters with white vinegar and using safe methods to get rid of them. So if you didn't know, roughly 2.1 million deer are involved in car accidents in the US every single year. Well, what else do you need to know about animal car collisions? It's time for you to get a daily dose of a special education episode, Animal Car Collision Prevention Edition. Millions, if not billions of animals every year have to make this dangerous journey because of one thing alone, modern infrastructure. With new roads being built every year, animals have to travel further and further to find shelter, food, and water for themselves. And with almost 1.5 billion cars on the road worldwide, it's definitely become a big issue. So then, what can we do to bring that number down? Well, the first thing you can do is to be more aware of your environment, especially where there's high amounts of foliage, as animals are more than likely hiding there. Secondly, slow down, especially at night because animals are usually more active. And if you do have to drive at night, use your high beam so you can see animals more visibly. Lastly, this one's a little bit new, but support construction of wildlife crossings, as animals will have a safe place to cross over and not have to get hit by cars. More animal crossings that we have, not you, better chance these animals have of being safe. So if you didn't know, on the island of Borneo there's a population of pygmy elephants? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Pygmy Elephant Edition. So these pint-sized pachyderms are known as pygmy elephants because Bornean elephants are about 60% of the size of their mainland cousins. How did those little elephants get there? Well, during the last ice age between 11,000 and 18,000 years ago, Borneo and the other Sunda Islands were connected to mainland Asia. And when the waters warmed up again, it separated Borneo from the mainland. Since there was only so many resources on the island, the elephants literally had to pull a Super Mario mini mushroom to go from this to, well, this. When animals have to shrink because of their island habitat, we call that insular dwarfism. And believe it or not, this isn't the first time elephants had to get small for an island habitat, because 180,000 years before, elephants got small on the Mediterranean islands. And the most famous of all of them is the Sicilian dwarf elephant, which got to about the size of a Shetland pony when fully grown. And the genus that this dwarf elephant belonged to also produced possibly the largest land mammal to ever exist, the Asian straight-tusked elephant. So if you didn't know, a fossa is so flexible they're able to turn their hind feet almost completely backwards. It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Fossa edition. Come and get it! Fossas are the largest land carnivore in Madagascar, thought to have come from mongoose-like ancestors. Even though they're land carnivores, they really are built for trees, as they live a mostly arboreal lifestyle. And why do they spend so much time in trees? Well, they have to go after their favorite meal, which would happen to be lemurs, as they make up over 50% of a fossa's diet. Other than a female fossa and her baby, fossas are usually solitary animals, but a study in 2009 actually showed that 3 male fossas hunted down a Shafaka lemur. And this unusual pack behavior might actually have been to hunt down larger lemurs that went extinct. And during the mating season, female fossas can afford to be picky, as up to 8 males will try to get her attention. But because these faker felines are polyandrous, they'll usually have more than one mate in a mating season. So if you didn't know, turkey vultures can actually projectile vomit up to 10 feet in self-defense. But what else should you know about vultures? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Vulture Edition. So vultures are really misunderstood birds, being seen as ugly, scary, and associated with death. But the role that they play is actually super important, being the cleanup crew of the animal kingdom. The reason that vultures are so good at their job is because of their stomach acid, which is strong enough to dissolve bones and safely eat disease-ridden flesh with things such as Ebola. And contrary to popular belief, not all vultures are ugly. I mean, look at the king vulture, for example. And here's something to note. Vultures weren't always looked down upon. Some of them were even looked at as royalty. Because in Egyptian culture, vultures were actually protected under the pharaoh's law, being seen as sacred animals. And even vultures in India would get the same treatment, as the temple in Toluca would get often visits from them, and the priest would give them sacrifices before noon. And if the vultures didn't show up, it was considered the presence of a sinner by the god Shiva. So if you didn't know, ants and termites make up almost 60% of all terrestrial animal biomass on Earth. But what else should you know about these eusocial insects? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Colony Edition. So why don't we talk about the differences first? Termites have shorter antennae and limbs and also have a straighter body, while ants have longer limbs and antennae and have a pronounced thorax. But what is a eusocial insect anyway? Well, I'm glad you asked. Eusociality is the highest level of a social group in the animal kingdom, being defined as taking care of offspring even with non-related adults taking care of them, multi-generational adults within one colony, and a division of labor between reproducing and non-reproducing adults. And even humans have been defined as being possibly a eusocial species. And another part of what makes a eusocial species is actually a caste system, as every termite and ant in their colony have a specific responsibility. Workers of a colony are responsible for building the nest, collecting food, taking care of the queen and the offspring. Soldiers, as you might have guessed it, are responsible for defending the colony from any imposing threats. And then there's the reproducers, also known as alates, which are responsible for the reproduction of eggs in the colony by mating with the queen, as it is her sole job to produce eggs for the colony. So if you didn't know, the little black dots on a crocodile's face are known as integumentary sensory organs, which help a crocodile move around its environment and find food. But what else should you know about crocodiles? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Crocodile Edition. Here's a quick PSA. Crocodiles and alligators are not the same thing, and you can tell the difference mainly by their snout and osteoderms. The one on the left is an alligator and the one on the right is a crocodile. and there are 16 true crocodile species found on every continent except Europe and Antarctica. Crocs can be found in a variety of environments such as freshwater, brackish water, and even saltwater. And because of their oceanic odyssey tendencies, that's how saltwater crocs got their name. And they do this enough to where they can have encounters with sharks, and as you can see from this one, the croc did not win. And if you think you can just climb up into a tree and be safe, there's actually 4 species of freshwater crocodiles that can climb trees. And you may not think it, but crocodiles are some of the best parents in the animal kingdom, being some of the only reptiles that show parental care to their children. And these ancient aquatic carnivore logs will guard their eggs very, very aggressively. So if you didn't know, humans have domesticated around 40 animal species. But what else should you know about our domestic friends? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation Domesticated Animal Edition.
But we need to ask the question first. What is domestication anyways? Well, domestication is the process in which animals or plants are selectively bred to be more useful to people. And for reference, we decided to start doing this in between 15,000 and 22,000 years ago. The first domesticated animal species was dogs, descending from wolves. What about all of our other domestic animals? I mean, where did they come from? Well, Indican and Taurian cattle both descended from the Oroq, being domesticated around 11,000 years ago. As for horses, there's still some debate about when and where they were domesticated, but it happened more than once. Chickens descended from the red jungle fowl about 4,000 years ago. Pigs descended from boars about 9,000 years ago. And yes, we've even domesticated bugs, as silk moths were domesticated 5,000 years ago. And there's even the potential for new domesticated species, as one day very soon, you could own a domestic fox.
So if you didn't know, pumas and mountain lions are the same thing, also being called cougars, catamounts, and panthers. But what else should you know about pumas? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation Puma Edition. So first things first, pumas are very adaptable predators, being able to thrive in multiple environments such as deserts, rainforest, plateaus, and even snowy and mountainous terrain. And because they're so adaptable, they range from Canada all the way down to southern Chile. And there's even a small population in Florida known as the Florida panther, a critically endangered subspecies of the puma. These puma predators are what we call generalists, being able to have a flexible diet, going from mice all the way up to the size of a moose. Because of their common name, the panther, they're mistaken for big cats when they are in fact not. Instead, their closest living relatives are cheetahs and jaguarundis, diverging from them in the late Miocene. And another reason why they're not big cats is because they don't roar, instead screaming, as females are known to do this to attract mates. So if you didn't know, my name's Oren, and I'm your host and creator of the Animal Education series here on TikTok, Edzucation. And I couldn't help but notice you guys had some questions about me. So today, you're going to learn a little bit more about the host and creator of Edzucation. On May 23, 2001, I was born into the city of Carrollton, Georgia, but this is not where I grew up for most of my life. Instead, I grew up in the city of Franklin, Georgia, being nestled right next to the famous Chattahoochee River. And since Newnan is right next door, I didn't grow up that far from Alan Jackson, believe it or not. And where did I get my love of animals from? Well, I'm glad you asked. As every child's future hyperfixation starts out, mine was little people, especially the zoo animals. But that wasn't the only thing that inspired me. This game right here, Zoo Tycoon 2, was the true beginning of my love for animals. And it all came to fruition one day when I went to the zoo in Atlanta, as I met Kelly, an African savanna elephant who's still there, and I got to wash her and feed her. And even to this day, I still love going to zoos, aquariums, and conservation centers to learn more about the animals of our world. And you might have noticed some of the videos in uniform. Well, that's because I'm a corporal in the United States Army, and I enlisted back in February 2021. And this is my beautiful loving wife, Olivia. But where did the idea for the Edzucation series come from? Well, it all started with George, a male okapi at the Brevard Zoo in Melbourne, Florida. And after meeting George for the first time, I knew I wanted to create animal education content, but I didn't know really where to start. That is until the TikTok ban happened. And then once it got uplifted, I decided to completely rebrand. That way I can make animal education content for you guys. And that's a little bit more about me in the series Edzucation. So if you didn't know, echidnas produce pink milk, sweating it through their mammary glands to feed their babies. But what else should you know about echidnas? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation Echidna Edition. So echidnas are monotremes, the only mammals that lay eggs, along with the duck-billed platypus. And there are 4 species of echidnas, with one being recently discovered in 2023. And to be more specific, that would be the Attenborough's lawn-beaked echidna. And yes, I'm talking about David Attenborough, who is considered the father of modern nature documentaries, and is also the brother to Richard Attenborough, who played John Hammond in Jurassic Park. But the question still remains, how did this echidna get its name? Well, it all started with Project Cyclops, taking place in the Cyclops Mountains in Papua New Guinea. Over the course of 4 weeks, a team of researchers took 80 trail cameras and trekked into the Indonesian wilderness. And this was not an easy feat, being quite dangerous as they had to go through mountainous terrain and experience 2 earthquakes during the process. And on the last day of their mission, with the last memory card in their trail cameras, they took a picture of an animal that had not been seen since 1961. And in his honor, they named it after the acclaimed and famed nature documentary host. But how about we wrap this up by talking about the real-life knuckles? Baby echidnas are called puggles. And unlike in male platypuses, male echidnas do not produce venom, instead producing a waxy substance that allows them to communicate during the mating season. So if you didn't know, 40% of the Australian white ibis population eats at landfills every single day. But what else should you know about these bin chickens? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education Bin Chicken Edition. So yes, these ibises eat a lot of trash, being also known as tip turkeys and dumpster divers, and by the Yindjibarndi people, the Martungura. But to be fair, we're the reason they have those names, as Australia produces up to 20 million tons of trash each year. But if you were to see them in the wild, they'd probably eat things such as crayfish and frogs. But because of human development, they've earned the same reputation as trash pandas. So they don't have a trashy reputation, they just eat it because they've had to adapt. And the males can be quite a romantic, as during the mating season, they will bow to a female and then offer her a stick, if you consider that romantic. And going back to the reputation, I should probably add one thing. They went from riches to rags, as the Australian white ibis is considered to be the same bird that inspired Thoth, an Egyptian moon god who represents wisdom, writing, and magic. So if you didn't know, the majority of animals that have horns are hoofed mammals, but deer do not have horns, instead antlers. But how do we know the difference between them? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education Animal Ornamentation Edition. So animals that have true horns have 2 components that make them up. So the outer part of a horn is made out of a keratin sheath, which will grow in the animal for the rest of its life, and on the inside a bony core. But in deer, antlers are not made out of keratin, instead being completely made of bone, and they shed them every single year. And another animal that is commonly mistaken to have a horn are narwhals, when it is in fact a tusk, as it is a specialized tooth that protrudes from their base. And unlike in horns and antlers, tusks are made out of enamel, and we see it in walruses, elephants, pigs, and more. And to clear up some confusion, yes, pronghorns do have horns, but they shed them, being kind of the mammal middleman between deer and antelope. And I bet you thought hornbills were safe. Well, you're wrong, as a hornbill's horn is actually called a casque, as it's completely made up of keratin and not bone. And I hate to break it to you guys, but giraffes don't have horns either, instead having ossicones, and the difference being that they're covered in skin, not keratin. And although many dinosaurs did have horns, this ceratopsian Pachyrhinosaurus also had something called a boss, which was a flat, bony protrusion from the face. So if you didn't know, the IUCN Red List is what gives every animal, plant, and fungus species their conservation status. But what else is there to know about conservation? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education Conservation Edition. If you played the Zoo Tycoon series, you might recognize these icons. Well, these are actually conservation status icons, indicating an animal's population in the wild. And the International Union of Conservation of Nature does the exact same thing, but they look a little bit different, and there's a couple more. In fact, there's a total of 9 different conservation statuses, and I'm going to go over each and every one of them. This one's pretty easy, as NE stands for Not Evaluated, which is a species that is not evaluated by the IUCN Red List. Up next we have DD, which stands for Data Deficient, which is any species that is tracked by the IUCN Red List, but there's not a lot of information known about their population numbers. And after that is Least Concern, a species with a high population count that really doesn't have to worry about it. Near-threatened species are pretty self-explanatory. They're any species that are not threatened at the moment, but have the potential to be in the future. and the next three are all at high risk of extinction, but being based on a percentage of a decrease in animals over 10 years or 3 generations, with vulnerable being 30%, endangered being 50 to 70%, and critically endangered being 80 to 90%. An EX with a red is extinct in the wild, and a regular EX, well, you get the picture. So if you didn't know, the scimitar horned oryx was saved by shooting them? Well, that can't be right. Or is it? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Oryx Edition. So our story begins with David Bamberger, a Texas rancher of all people. And in 1969 he purchased a ranch, but because of these ash juniper trees, there wasn't any water on the land. So when he cleared out the trees, it became the perfect paradise for his next project. Due to oryx importations to the US during the 1970s, he decided to devote 600 acres to these animals, with almost every animal in the country at the time being sent to his ranch. And he knew how to take care of them because the numbers started growing. And to ensure their survival, he decided to send them to hunting ranches. Wait, what? Now hear me out when I say this. David and the hunting ranch owners knew that because these animals were rare, hunters would pay top dollar to hunt them, and in turn they could use that same money to raise, care for, and breed these oryxes. And they were so good at it that there's a population of roughly 10 to 12,000 animals today in the US. And some of them are even being sent back home to the deserts of Africa, now being classified as endangered, not extinct in the wild. And these hunting heroic stories also have worked for the Dama Gazelle and the Addax. So if you didn't know, dinosaurs didn't just live in warm places, they also lived in the snow. But how does that make sense? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Snow Dino Edition. So no, there wasn't an ice age during the Mesozoic, but there was snow, and some dinosaurs were really adapted for it. In fact, we found dinosaurs at the North and South Pole, but we're going to be talking about the Prince Creek Formation in Alaska. And these dinos came in all shapes and sizes, with animals such as Pachyrhinosaurus, Nanuqsaurus, Dromaeosaurs, and even an unidentified species of Edmontosaurus. But we still gotta ask the question, how did they survive there? For theropods and avian dinosaurs, they most likely had feathers, keeping them warm even during cold conditions. For the dinosaurs that didn't, their sheer size and bulk, along with thick skin, probably did. I mean, have you seen Edmontosaurus? Some of them got bigger than a T-Rex. Truth be told, some dinosaurs did make it to the Ice Age in the form of birds, such as teratorns and terrorbirds. So if you didn't know, the little ring on an earthworm is called a satellum, helping with reproduction and regeneration. But what else should you know about earthworms? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Earthworm Edition. Although quite small, they play a big part in our ecosystem, being detritivores, animals that eat decomposed matter. And animals that eat worms are not called insectivores, but rather vermivores. And the time that you'll most likely see worms is during a rainstorm or at night. And it actually has to do with the moisture levels of the soil, as if the soil gets too wet, it's not good for a worm, so they wiggle their way up to the surface. And worms are nocturnal, as they feed during the night at the surface. But how do they move around without a skeleton? Well, worms actually have something called a hydrostatic skeleton, being made up of fluid. And they're not the only animals that have this, as sea anemones and jellyfish have it as well. And remember how I said worms were tiny? Well, this is the Amatola earthworm, the biggest earthworm on Earth, being found in South Africa. So if you didn't know, peafowl display one of the greatest examples of sexual dimorphism in the animal kingdom, as peacocks are very colorful, and as for peahens, not really. But what else should you know about sexual dimorphism? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Sexual Dimorphism Edition. So sexual dimorphism refers to the physical differences between male and female animals of a species. And probably the most apparent one is their size, as male animals are usually bigger than their female counterparts. But this isn't always the case, as female anglerfish are significantly larger than males. Physical appearance also plays a big part, as we see in lions, as lionesses have no mane, but male lions do. And in deer, the males are the ones who rock the fancy headwear, not the females. Strutting our way back to peacocks, it can also take in the form of color. But why do males have to be fancier than females? Well, females in the animal kingdom can be picky, so males have to fight for dominance, and whoever looks the best and can fight the best with the blessings that they're given will sire the next generation. So if you didn't know, common cuttlefish produce a reddish-brown ink known as sepia, which is what we used to write and draw with for a long time. But what else should you know about cuttlefish? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Cuttlefish Edition. So cuttlefish are cephalopods, being in the same family as octopus, squid, and nautilus. And there's over 100 species of them, with the largest being the giant Australian cuttlefish. But with every single one, they're considered chameleons of the sea due to their ability to change color because of a special thing called chromatophores. What are chromatophores? Well, they're a special cell inside of an animal which gives them a variety of pigments, allowing them to change color to blend into their environment. And as you can see, Squidward's cousin can do it really, really well. And cuttlefish have something unique to them, known as a cuttlebone, which is an internal shell that helps them regulate their buoyancy. And although cuttlefish are considered a delicacy in some parts of the world, one you should not eat is the flamboyant cuttlefish, as the poison in their body is as strong as a blue ring octopus's venom, strong enough to kill 26 humans. So if you didn't know, blue poison dart frogs are some of the only animals in the world that can be truly blue. But how does that make sense? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, True Blue Edition. Although a lot of animals appear to be blue, this is not the case, as with the blue whale, as they are not blue. They are mottled gray. And no, blue jays are not blue either. And I know it sounds crazy, so let me explain. A lot of animals appear to be blue in the same way the sky does, in the form of Rayleigh scattering. When light enters the atmosphere, it hits air molecules, scattering shorter wavelength colors, and blue being one of them. So the blue you see in most animals is actually an illusion. So then, what makes an animal truly blue? For an animal to be truly blue, they would have to produce anthocyanin, and it's only usually seen in plants. And here's a quick fact, no mammal on Earth can produce anthocyanin, including humans. And Papa Smurf over here is no exception, as he took colloidal silver, which produced cyanosis in his skin. So other than a few amphibians, fish, reptiles, and insects, no animals can be blue. So if you didn't know, there are some mantis species out there that can be pink. But what else should you know about these pink bugs? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Pink Mantis Edition. So first let's talk about this one, the conehead mantis, native to the Mediterranean. And if you see Mediterranean wildflowers, you can probably understand why. But they don't just come in pink, they also come in green and brown, being adept masters of camouflage. And for good reason, as they use this camouflage to hunt prey and also hide from predators. And yes, this is a hummingbird. And if we go to Southeast Asia, we can find another example of this with the orchid mantis. And if you couldn't guess from the name, they resemble orchid flowers, which are also native to the region. And because of their stunning beauty, they have become very popular in the exotic pet trade. And here's something to note for anyone who might want an orchid mantis. They are considered intermediate level pets because of their specific requirements. And one of the most common causes of death for them is actually lack of airflow to their enclosure. So if you're going to keep one, make sure it has a proper home. But really, I would not recommend it.
So if you didn't know, opossums are surprisingly clean animals, regularly cleaning themselves to get rid of ticks. But what else should you know about opossums? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Opossum Edition. And yes, you heard me right, this is an opossum, not a possum. To be a true possum, you have to be found in Indonesia in the land down under. But trash kitties and tree rabbits do have something in common. They're both marsupials. So when you really think about it, you have bouncy possums, devil possums, nosy possums, and whatever that thing is over there. What the heck, I'll give him a proper introduction. This is a Colo Colo opossum, but it's really more of a possum? Also known as the Monito del Monte, this mystery marsupial is closer to true possums in Australia, but it's found in South America. And speaking of, you can find opossums in South America as well, with almost every single species being there. With one exception to the rule, as the Virginia opossum, the American classic, is the only marsupial you can find in North America, and Central America as well.
So if you didn't know, lovebird isn't just an expression, they're actually a type of parrot. But what else should you know about these avian valentines? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Lovebird Edition. As their name would suggest, lovebirds are very loyal to each other, mating for life in a monogamous pair, and their love knows no boundaries, as sometimes males will form a bond with each other and be a couple. And if it just so happens that the lovebird's mate passes away, they'll experience a very complex grieving process, going into a state of depression. But if you don't have an avian companion for your lovebird, they're also known to form very strong relationships with their owners, and they've even been known to get jealous when they're not shown attention. And when you usually think of a lovebird, you see them as green with peachy faces, but they come in a variety of colors. Although all non-wild species have some form of green, in domestic birds you can usually find orange, yellow, and blue. And speaking of wild, if you want to see wild lovebirds, you can find them in Africa and Madagascar. But you don't even have to go that far, as in Arizona there are feral lovebird populations that burrow in cactus. So if you didn't know, cichlids make up 5% of all vertebrate species on Earth. But what else should you know about cichlids? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Cichlid Edition. So on the lower estimate, there's 1,650 species, but on the higher estimate, there could be up to 3,000 species. And in Africa alone, there are 500 species, being in Lake Victoria, Tanganyika, and Malawi. And yes, tilapia are cichlids too, with over 100 species being described. With the Nile tilapia the most likely you'll find in a grocery store. And because of how colorful and varied they are very popular in freshwater aquariums. With the most common being angelfish, Oscars, discus fish, flower horns, and frontosas, also known as humphead fish. And usually you'll find them in Africa, South America, and Asia, but North America has one species, the Rio Grande cichlid. And if you want to have some cichlids in your aquarium, you better be ready to cough up some money, as pike cichlids are some of the most expensive, with some estimates being up to $5,000 a fish. So if you didn't know, the leafy sea dragon is the official marine emblem of Southern Australia. But what else should you know about sea dragons? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Sea Dragon Edition. Although being similar to seahorses, they are their own thing in the same family, with a couple of key differences. The biggest difference they have is their physical appearance, as seahorses have prehensile tails, while sea dragons usually don't. And notice how I say usually, because there is one species that has a prehensile tail, the ruby sea dragon, which was discovered in 2015. But the best way to identify a sea dragon is by their leafy appendages, and they don't use them to swim, but rather camouflage from predators. Another big difference is how they carry their babies, as male seahorses carry theirs in a pouch, but male sea dragons don't, instead carrying them on their tail, with up to 300 eggs at a time. And the last big difference that they have is their geographic region, as seahorses can be found in reefs worldwide, but sea dragons can only be found off the coast of southern Australia. So if you didn't know, before they went extinct, thylacines were the largest carnivorous marsupials of modern times. But what else should you know about Tasmanian tigers? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Tasmanian Tiger Edition. Although called Tasmanian tigers and Tasmanian wolves, like I said, they're neither. They're marsupials found in Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. Or they were at least. So then, what happened to our pouch pals down under? Well, you see, in mainland Australia and New Guinea, around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, thylacines were facing human pressure in the face of a new competitor on the scene. And that would be none other than dingoes, as dingoes more than likely outcompeted thylacines in their natural habitat. And for the ones that survived in Tasmania, they would soon face another problem, the government and sheep farmer putting bounties on their heads and being seen as pests. And by the time the Tasmanian government decided to protect Tasmanian tigers, the last one died in captivity in a zoo in 1936, just 2 months after they were granted their protection. So if you didn't know, secretary birds are mainly terrestrial, spending a lot of time on the ground. But what else should you know about these kung fu chickens? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Secretary Bird Edition. So the secretary bird lifestyle has a kick to it, as they use this specialized kick to take down snakes, and even venomous ones, and this kick has also been known to murk cheetahs. But the truth is, snakes only make up about 1% of their diet, with most of what they eat being arthropods. And although they spend a lot of time on the ground, secretary birds are more than capable of flying, and there's even been an incident of one flying so high, it collided with a plane. And if you see one in a tree, that's because they do not sleep on the ground. They sleep in the high tops of acacia trees along with their partner. Speaking of courtship, secretary birds mate for life, and the mating dances they do include something called a pendulum flight, where they swoop up and down in the sky to attract a mate. And although they might be known as the secretaries of the savanna, secretary bird's scientific name is Sagittarius serpentarius, which translates to archer of snakes. So if you didn't know, clouded leopards have the largest canine teeth compared to body size in any cat species. But what else should you know about clouded leopards? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Clouded Leopard Edition. So first, let's talk about that dentition. Clouded leopards have canine teeth that are up to 2 inches long, comparable to canines on tigers. And to put that into perspective, clouded leopards are 10 times smaller than tigers too, so they're not big cats at all, but their bite is definitely worse than their bark, or meow in this case. Which brings me to my next point. Clouded leopards are not leopards, or big cats at all actually. They're in their own genus, Neofelis. However, they are as close to a leopard as you can get in the feline family tree, being in the same subfamily Pantherinae, diverging during the late Miocene. What they truly are nocturnal hunters, using their night vision to hunt down monkeys and birds. And they're not just good at hunting at night, they're also good at climbing trees too, being able to climb trees down head first, hang upside down, and even hang from their legs from a tree branch.
So if you didn't know, although this might look like a regular hippo, this is in fact a pygmy hippo. But what should you know about pygmy hippos? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Pygmy Hippo Edition. Well, for starters, let's talk about pygmy hippo's size, as they're usually only the 10th of a size of a common hippo. However, that is not the only difference between the two animals. Although they will inhabit water sources, pygmy hippos spend more time on land than regular hippos. Geographically speaking, these amphibious assault ponies are only found in West Africa, being found in forests and swamps. And if we're going to talk about differences, I might as well point out their dentition. Pygmy hippos only have 1 pair of incisors, as common hippos can have 2 or up to 3. And the way they use their teeth is different as well, as pygmy hippos are normally browsers, eating more fruit, leaves, and roots, as hippos are grazers, eating grass. I'll end on this note. Both animals have very different reputations, as common hippos are known to kill up to 500 people a year. But as for pygmy hippos, well, but if you're a Sitatunga at the Grand Rapids Zoo, well, good luck, Charlie. So if you didn't know, sloth bears are insectivores, with 70 to 90% of their diet being made up of bugs. But what else should you know about sloth bears? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Sloth Bear Edition. You see, sloth bears are pretty unique in the bear family, as when they mature, they lose their 2 top canine teeth, making it harder for them to eat things like meat, but it's not impossible for them to get their protein in. As it turns out, missing your 2 front teeth actually works out to your advantage, becoming a Harry Hoover vacuum cleaner. But that's not the only trick sloth bears have, as they basically have off-road tires for feet in the form of their claws. And these 3-inch razor-sharp claws come with a variety of purposes, such as tearing apart termite mounds, traversing rough terrain, and even sending the king of the jungle up and running. As in a direct confrontation between Winnie the Pooh and Tigger, that silly old bear is probably gonna win. And you see this right here? This isn't a hug. This is something far worse, as sloth bears kill the most people per capita of any bear species. So if you didn't know, the Indian gaur, or Indian bison, was the original inspiration for Red Bull, which came from another drink known as Krating Dane, which translates to red gaur. But what else should you know about gaur? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Gaur Edition. If you don't think gaur are that big, look how big it is compared to an American bison. Male gaur stand about 10 centimeters taller than American bison bulls and weigh roughly 1,000 pounds more. That's 3,000 pounds of pure muscle. And if you're wondering why they have to be a living tank, they share the same habitat as tigers, wild dogs, and saltwater crocodiles, so they have to be ready to fight anything. But muscle isn't their only weapon, as their horns can be 24 to 45 inches long. That's a lot of horn to gore with. And going back to the Red Bull part, the Red Bull probably comes from the fact that female gaur and calves are usually a reddish-brown color, while the males, aka the bulls, are black. And you would think because gaur are so aggressive we haven't domesticated them. Well, not exactly. We have, in the form of the Gayal, their domestic counterpart. So if you didn't know, Seriemas are the closest living relative to the now extinct terror birds that once roamed the Americas.
But what else should you know about Sariimas? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Sariima Edition. Sariimas are the South American counterpart to the African secretary bird, and ecologically and physically, they're pretty similar. And yes, while they are similar, Sariimas actually have a couple of key, unique features to them. One of the biggest differences between them is the fact that Sariimas have sickle claws, just like the dromaeosaurs during the Mesozoic. And this specialized sickle claw is also known as the killing claw, which they use to pin and restrain prey, tear apart bigger chunks of flesh, and even have combat between them. And if their talons don't work, they also have another trick up their sleeve, also known as prey thrashing, where they will pick it up with their beak and slam it into the ground onto a rock, stunning it or killing it. And although they hunt on the ground just like terror birds, they have one thing that their ancestors did not: the ability to fly, although they don't use it very much. So if you didn't know, the Guam kingfisher is a species of bird that is extinct in its natural habitat. But what else should you know about Guam kingfishers? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Guam Kingfisher Edition. So yes, this island bird cannot be found in Guam anymore, but let me tell you a story of why that is. So at some point during the 1940s and 1950s, exported goods would make their way to Guam, but there would be a soon-to-be major problem for the island country. Because everything was looking good in paradise until the brown tree snake arrived. With no natural predators in the area, brown tree snakes became the top of the food chain very quickly, and they decimated 10 of the 12 native forest bird species on the island, driving them to extinction, with one of them being the Guam kingfisher. But this isn't the end of our story, as thanks to conservation efforts from zoos across the world, the Guam kingfisher has now been reintroduced to a new place not far from their home. This avian heaven is known as the Palmyra Atoll, the most expensive island ever purchased in world history, selling for $30 million, being sold to the US government. And for the first time in 40 years, in April of this year, Guam kingfisher eggs were laid in the wild, so there is hope for them to return home. So if you didn't know, tapirs are considered to be the largest land mammal in South America, with the South American tapir or the Brazilian tapir being the largest. But what else should you know about tapirs? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Tapir Edition. Although they may look like a cross between an elephant and a pig, they are in fact neither, being closest related to horses and rhinos. And there are 4 extant species in the Common Era, with the lowland tapir, the mountain tapir, the Baird's tapir, and the Malayan tapir. And although tapirs are South America's largest land mammals, Malayan tapirs are actually the largest of all tapir species, being found in Southeast Asia. But all 4 species do share something in common. Their babies all have speckled coloration, helping them blend in into their environments. Don't be mistaken by their cute appearance, as although they are herbivores, they can get aggressive, and those incisor teeth can cause very damaging lacerations. If you want to throw a pool party, just know the guy with the tapir fade is going to be there. Tapirs are very well known for their swimming abilities, using their trunks as snorkels, being able to stay underwater for several minutes. So you probably already know, but if I were to ask you what animal you wanted to go see first at a zoo, you'd probably say something big like an elephant, a tiger, or a lion. But why don't we take a look at some of the underrated animals that you find at zoos very commonly? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Education, Underrated Zoo Animal Edition. We're going to talk about animals that get overlooked. I think antelope are a good place to start. First off, not all antelope species are created equal. They come a variety of size and shapes, such as the roan antelope, the impala, probably one of the most common antelopes in zoos, and the biggest of them all, elands. And fun fact, elands have been successfully domesticated in South Africa and Russia for their meat and milk. And up next, I think we gotta talk about monitor lizards. Most people look at them and just think that, they're some big gecko or something, but that's not true, because Komodo dragons are venomous, and most monitor lizards are, and they have the capability to bring down large animals such as deer and water buffalo. And to wrap things up, I don't think flamingos get the credit they deserve either. And I know what you're thinking, but be real with me. If they weren't at the front of the zoo, you wouldn't make your way to go out to see them. And a lot of people don't anyways because their habitats usually stink really bad. But here's something to note. Flamingos don't just exist in Africa, they live on every single continent in the world excluding Antarctica and Australia. So if you didn't know, wolverines have the capability to take down animals 20 times their size, including moose, and in some cases, polar bears. But what else should you know about wolverines? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Wolverine Edition. So wolverines are found in alpine environments in North America, Europe, and Asia, and they're able to withstand these temperatures thanks to their frost-resistant fur, letting them be active year-round. Another trait that helps them in the snow is their snowshoe-like paws, letting them cross the top of the snow with ease. And you would think, being the size of a medium dog, they would have trouble fighting off wolves and bears, but they have an animal superpower, being extremely pissed off. And despite their reputation, wolverines are not known for killing humans, but what they will do is tear apart trail cameras. I guess they're not a fan of the spotlight. And aggressiveness isn't always their first choice. Sometimes they'll use a special gland near their butt to make a foul spray to ward off predators. If you think this menace society mentality sounds familiar, it's because they share the same family with honey badgers. And if I were to pick one, I would say the wolverine would most likely win. So if you didn't know, an ungulate is a mammal that walks on hooves, and there's two distinct orders, Perissodactyls and Artiodactyls. But what else should you know about ungulate mammals? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Ungulate Edition. So first, why don't we talk about Artiodactyls or even-toed ungulates? They're classified this way because they have either 2 or 4 toes on each foot, and most of them have the ability to chew cud, something that odd-toe ungulates do not possess. And going by suborder, let's talk about tylopods first. Tylopods include only one modern family, camels, which includes camels, alpacas, llamas, and the wild guanacos and vicuñas. Second, we have the whippomorphs, which includes hippos and cetaceans, aka dolphins and whales. And I know what you're thinking. Whales don't have hooves, but they do come from a hoofed mammal ancestor. Up next, we have the suiforms, which includes pigs and peccaries. And something to note about them is that they're omnivorous, which is an exception to the rule of most hoofed mammals being herbivores. And the last suborder are ruminants, and they all share something in common, having a forward-chambered stomach, with the first being the rumen, which gives them the ability to chew cud. And this includes cows, sheep, goats, deer, and giraffes. And now we can move on to the odd-toe ungulates or Perissodactyls. Perissodactyls are split into 2 suborders in the modern day, which includes the ceratomorphs, aka rhinos and tapirs, and the hippomorphs, which includes horses, asses, and zebras. And speaking of odd-toed ungulates, why don't we talk about some from the past, as it was more diverse during the Cenozoic. Brontotheres, although looking like rhinos, were more related to horses, and some species could get up to the size of modern elephants. Another honorable mention are the Calicotheres, looking like a cross between a horse and a gorilla, but being more related to the rhinos and tapirs of today. And to wrap things up, I think we should talk about Toxodon, because it is neither an odd-toed ungulate or an even-toed ungulate, being a Merida ungulate instead. Merida ungulates were an extinct clade of mammals that evolved in South America, which includes the Leptopterns and the Noda ungulates, and this is probably the most famous one, Macrauchenia. So if you didn't know, turtles are one of the oldest animal groups on Earth today, originating in the Triassic period 230 million years ago. But what else should you know about turtles? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Turtle Edition. So the history of turtles looks a lot different than you might think, because this is Unitosaurus, and it has broadened ribs like turtles of today, but it didn't use them for protection, but rather burrowing. And let's just say turtles diversified a lot, with there being 14 unique families in the modern day. And a perfect example of this adaptation is the alligator snapping turtle, and they have a special tongue that they use to wriggle around like a worm to lure in prey, and then clamping down shut with their powerful jaws. And sea turtles are another good example of this, being adapted for marine life in the open ocean, only coming on land to lay their eggs. And some sea turtles were so good at what they did, it led to the biggest turtle known to history in the late Cretaceous, Archelon. And on the other side of the coin, we have tortoises. And not only do they live specialized on land, they have some of the longest lifespans in the animal kingdom, living up to 100 years in the wild. In some cases, tortoises have been recorded to live up to 170 plus years. Tortoises could get even bigger, with the Atlas tortoise being the largest tortoise species on Earth, reaching up to a staggering 4 metric tons. And as for the rest of turtles, most of them don't get that big, and this includes species such as box turtles, diamondback terrapins, soft-shelled turtles, and even a species of freshwater turtle named by Steve Irwin himself, the Irwin's turtle. So if you didn't know, no animal on Earth is 100% an herbivore, occasionally eating things such as bone and small animals. But what else should you know about opportunistic carnivory? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Opportunistic Carnivore Edition. So although grazing animals are herbivores by definition, they will occasionally eat meat because of one thing in particular, mineral deficiency. When an herbivore's environment doesn't give them the minerals that they require, they'll occasionally start eating things like bones, also known as osteophagy, where they can get minerals such as calcium and phosphorus. You would think an animal such as the giant panda would be a 100% herbivore due to their bamboo diet, but this is also not true, as they will also eat small animals and bones some of the time. Some animals such as hippos may not be as herbivorous as we thought they were, because during the drought season, they'll steal carcasses from other predators and even go out of their way to take down a zebra if they need to. Considering they're related to entelodonts, aka Terminator pigs, I'm not that surprised. This also comes with another surprising twist. No carnivore just eats meat either, as big cats will occasionally be seen eating grass to help in digestion. This also includes polar bears, being known as one of the most hyper-carnivorous animals on the planet, will occasionally eat things such as berries and seaweed. So if you didn't know, tanukis, or raccoon dogs, are considered to be mythological animals in Japanese culture, having the ability to shapeshift or change objects into others. But what else should you know about tanukis? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Tanuki Edition. If you think this animal looks familiar, that's because Mario's Tanuki suit is based off of them, as well as Tom Nook and his family from the Animal Crossing series. And no, tanukis don't fly or glide, but what they can do is climb trees, something we don't see much of in the canine family. And yes, I did say canines because they belong to the dog family, being closest related to foxes of all things. As much as I would love to show you more about why they're important to Japanese folklore, there are reasons that I can't. And to wrap things up on a more heartfelt note, tanukis are the only canine species that hibernate, and when they do so, they get into a burrow with their lifelong mate, and they get ready to hunker down for the winter months. Well, if you didn't know, although lions are apex predators, they only have about a 25 to 30% success rate on hunts. So let me introduce you to the most successful hunter in Africa, the African wild dog. But what else should you know about them? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, African Wild Dog Edition. So yes, African wild dogs have the highest success rate of kills of any other predator in Africa, if not on the planet, because they have an 85 to 90% success rate when bringing down animals. And why are these pallet puppies so successful? Well, they prioritize family first over anything. They travel in groups of 6 to 20 individuals to go on hunts to take down things such as small antelope and even wildebeest. And speaking of family, the puppies in the pack always eat first, and African wild dogs have the highest survival rate of any canine species when it comes to their litters. However, this does come with a drawback. Being so successful isn't always the best thing, as lions and hyenas will regularly compete with them, stealing kills because of their larger size. Oh, if you didn't know, this is a frog, but not just any kind of frog. This is a purple frog, or also known as the pig-nosed frog. But what else should you know about purple frogs? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Purple Frog Edition. So they're unlike other frogs for a couple of reasons, and the first being their body plan. Their hind limbs are so short that these frogs do not possess the capability to jump. So if they don't jump like other frogs, what do they do exactly? Well, I'm glad you asked, because they use those limbs and their sense of smell to burrow underground looking for ants and termites. And they don't sound like other frogs either, as some recordings have shown that they sound like clucking chickens. So, long story short, they don't look like frogs, act like frogs, or even sound like frogs. And to be completely honest with you, we don't really know much about them, as they were only discovered recently in 2003 in Western Ghats of India. Because these frogs are so rare, they're considered to be a living fossil in the modern day. And you know, I gotta go on ahead and say it, they look like something I would make in the creature stage of Spore. So if you didn't know, primates are an order of mammals that are characterized by large brains, grasping hands and feet, and forward-facing eyes, as well as a couple of other features. And they are divided into two suborders, the Haplorhines and the Strepsirrhines. But what else should you know about primates? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Primate Edition. So first, why don't we talk about the Strepsirrhines, also known as primitive primates. And they're called primitive because they keep a lot of physical features from their basal ancestors. Arguably, the most famous of them are the lemurs, which evolved in Madagascar during the Eocene 50 to 60 million years ago. But it also includes the podos, galagos or bush babies, and a primate that's actually venomous, lorises. And now we can move on to the Haplorhines or advanced primates, and they show higher intelligence than their primitive cousins. Just leaving it at Haplorhines doesn't make sense. I have to break it down even further because there's two infraorders, with the Tarsiforms only including tarsiers. And on the other end of the Haplorhine spectrum, we have the Simians or Simiforms, which includes Catarrhine monkeys and Platyrrhine monkeys. And let me give you a better explanation of what those are. So to break it down, Catarrhines are simians that are found in the Old World, also being known as Old World monkeys, but also include great apes such as orangutans, chimpanzees, bonobos, gibbons, gorillas, and humans. Platyrrhines are a lot more simple because they're just New World monkeys being found in the Americas. So if you didn't know, over 900 species of dinosaurs have been described to science, and they're divided into two clades, the Saurischians and the Ornithischians. But what else should you know about all the different types of dinosaurs? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Dinosaur Taxonomy Edition. So let's break it down. Ornithischians, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, have 32 subgroups, but I'm only going to talk about the most well-known. And to kick it off, let's talk about the Thyreophorans, which are very well known for their impressive osteoderms that cover their body. And this includes Ankylosaurs, Stegosaurs, and the lesser-known Scelidosaurs. And up next we have the ornithopods, which are very well known for having a chewing apparatus that is considered the most complex of any non-avian dinosaur. And this includes hadrosaurs, iguanodonts, thescelosaurs, and dryosaurs. And if we want to talk about head ornamentation, we should talk about the Marginocephalians, which includes ceratopsian dinosaurs like Triceratops, and also includes the Pachycephalosaurs. And now we can move on to the Saurischians, or reptile-hipped dinosaurs, and this includes theropod dinosaurs, sauropods, and even modern-day birds of all things. We can dive a little bit deeper into sauropods. Most of sauropods that we know of, such as Argentinosaurus and Brachiosaurus, are actually what we call macronarians, a specific clade in the sauropods. And arguably, the most popular dinosaurs in media are theropods, but they weren't just giant monsters like T-Rex and Spinosaurus. Other popular groups include the raptors, tickle chickens, also known as therizinosaurs, and lastly, the only dinosaurs that are still with us, birds. And truth be told, if any bird looks like a modern day dinosaur, it would probably be a cassowary. So if you didn't know, this is the Pair-David's deer, also known as the Milu in Chinese. But what else should you know about Pair-David's deer? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Pair-David's Deer Edition. So this deer is also called the Four Unlikes in Chinese legend, but let me tell you why it got that name. So the story goes that 3,000 years ago, there was a tyrant king in ancient China, and 4 animals, an ox, donkey, horse, and deer, all went into a cave to meditate to seek advice. When they emerged from the cave, they all became one animal, the Milu. After receiving a blessing from the primeval Lord of Heaven, this animal was tasked out to help a sage known as Zhang Zia, who rode the animal into battle to defeat the evil king. And having a legendary status like that, they were held in high regard, alright, as hunting trophies. And because they were so popular, they almost went extinct. Enter Herbrand Arthur Russell, the 11th Duke of Bedford. The Duke was very impressed with these animals, so he decided to buy a herd and put them at the Woburn Abbey estate in England. Although he didn't know it at the time, but every single Père David's deer in the modern day is the descendant from that original herd. So he saved an entire species because he wanted some exotic animals on his front lawn. Well, if you didn't know, a chondrichthyon is any fish with a skeleton made up of cartilage, and they're divided into 2 subclasses, the elasmobranchs and the holocephalans. But what else should you know about cartilaginous fish? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Chondrichthyon edition. So first, let's talk about the elasmobranchs, being the most common cartilaginous fishes. They have 5 to 7 pairs of gills, rigid dorsal fins, and placoid scales. And they're divided into 2, divisions. The cetaceans, which are modern sharks, and the batoidians, which are anything else that is not a shark. Here's the thing, sharks have a very interesting taxonomy, so let me break it down. So we have squalian sharks and galleon sharks. Squalian sharks do not possess an anal fin, but galleon sharks do. So for squalian sharks, we have saw sharks, squatiniforms, echinorhinoforms, squaliforms, and lastly, the hexanchiforms. And for galleon sharks, we have ground sharks, mackerel sharks, including the great white, carpet sharks, and bullhead sharks. And now that we're done with sharks, we can move on to the batoidians, which we know as rays. And these include stingrays, skates, shovel-nose rays, and electric rays. Before you ask, no, I didn't forget about manta rays, they just fall under the same order as stingrays. Now that we're done with the elasmobranchs, we can move on to the holocephalans. Holocephalans are known for having their upper jaw fused to the rest of their skull, and this only includes chimeras in the modern day. If you didn't know, toucans and hornbills, although looking similar, are not closely related. But what else should you know about the differences between them? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Big Bill Comparison Edition. But first, let's talk about genetics. Unlike hornbills, toucans belong to the order Picaforms, and their closest relatives are woodpeckers. Looking back to Pokemon Sun and Moon, Pikipek's evolution line makes more sense. But as for hornbills and ground hornbills, they belong to a separate order, the Berceratiforms. Their closest relatives look like they're about to participate in Fashion Week, being Hoopos. The second difference that they have is their geographical location. Toucans can be found in Central and South America, and hornbills can be found in Africa and Asia. It's important to point this out because they evolved independently of each other, although looking similar, and this is what we call convergent evolution. The last main difference I want to talk about is the hornbill's casque that the toucans do not possess. To explain what a casque is, it's an enlargement of the bones in the upper mandible or the skull of a hornbill, and it allows them to amplify their calls to find mates. We don't just see it in hornbills, we also see it in cassowaries. Well, if you didn't know, a platypus can actually detect electrical currents in the water, and this is what we call electroreception, being a platypus's sixth sense. But what else should you know about the platypus? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Platypus Edition. Along with echidnas, platypuses are monotremes, mammals that lay eggs instead of giving live birth. When the platypus was first described to science, most people were very skeptical that the animal existed, being considered a hoax. And understandably so, because Europeans had never seen anything like it before. Because it looked like a beaver, it had a bill similar to a duck. It took nearly a century to find out that platypuses laid eggs. But platypuses get even weirder, because male platypuses have venomous spurs on their hind feet, and venom isn't something we normally see in mammals. And although real platypuses aren't secret agents like Perry, It can be bluish green, glowing that color under UV light. So if you didn't know, rodents make up the largest order of mammals in the animal kingdom with over 2,000 species. But what else should you know about rodents? It's time for you to get your daily dose of education, Rodent Edition. You're probably wondering, how do I spot a true rodent? Well, I'm glad you asked, because true rodents have 4 incisor teeth that are stronger than iron and usually orange that never stop growing in their entire lifetime. And I should probably add, rabbits are not rodents, they're lagomorphs. There is a difference. And now that we got semantics out of the way, let's talk about the 5 clades that make up rodents. So first up we have Anomaluromorpha, which includes spring hares, anomalures, also known as scaly-tailed squirrels, and the scaly tails. Up next we got Castoromorpha, which includes kangaroo rats, gophers, and everybody's favorite dam builders, beavers. Up next we have Skieromorpha, which not only includes squirrels, but also includes dormice. And lastly, mountain beavers, but don't get it twisted, you can tell them apart because they don't have the iconic tail. Second to last, we have Maiamorpha, which alone makes up roughly a quarter of all mammal species. And there's so many, I'm just going to name a few, such as mice, voles, jerboas, hamsters, and the rodents that share something in common with Epstein, lemmings, because they both didn't. And lastly, we have Hystricomorpha, having the most families of any rodent clade, 17. Also, they have a Hystricomorphous zygomasoteric system, whatever that means. This includes examples such as capybaras, agoutis, cavies, porcupines, chinchillas, naked mole rats, and pacas. Now you know why Mickey Mouse doesn't attend any of his family reunions. Well, if you didn't know, pangolins are one of the world's most trafficked animals on the planet, being poached for their scales. And although they look like scaly anteaters, they're not? Let's talk about it. That's right, I'm back, and today marks the first episode of our new series, Creature Conversation, Pangolin Edition. So I know at first glance, pangolins look like they would be close cousins to anteaters, but that's not the case. But in reality, the family reunion they would be most likely to pull up to is with the carnivorans, aka cats, dogs, bears, and more. Another major difference between true anteaters and pangolins is their location, as all 8 species are found in Africa and Asia, and there's the possibility for being a 9th species as well. So then, are all pangolins the same? Well, not exactly. Let me break it down for you. Some species, like the ground pangolin, live a more terrestrial lifestyle, and they get a lot heavier too, as the ground pangolin found in Africa can weigh up to 70 pounds. Others are much smaller and live in the trees, such as the Chinese pangolin, which only gets up to about 15 pounds. And if you ever want to be able to tell the difference between an African and an Asian pangolins have these small bristles on their back, while African pangolins do not. And even though pangolins can come in different shapes and sizes, they do have one thing in common: being on the defense, as pangolins can roll up into a ball using their scales as a shield to protect them from predators, and if that doesn't work, they can spray a foul odor just like skunks to deter them if that doesn't work. And if you can't get enough of pangolins, or you just like to get an educational gift for your kids, I suggest you check out the Education subscription box service, and it just so happens that their animal of the month happens to be pangolins. And don't worry, 10% of your purchase is going to the Pangolin Crisis Fund. That way it can help our pangolin companions. So if you didn't know, this is a golden zebra, and this is a genetic variation that isn't seen much in large mammals. But what if I told you there's also such a thing as a golden okapi? Welcome back to another episode of the Creature Conversation, Shiny Stripes Edition. So yes, this isn't AI generated, it's not fake, this is real, and his name's Mzimu, which is Swahili for ghost, and he is the first ever recorded okapi in human history with leucism. You're probably wondering, why is this such a big deal? Well, to add some context, we didn't even know the okapi existed until 1901, being one of the last large land mammals ever described to science by Dr. Harry Johnston. And the reason it took so long is because okapis are shy and elusive, being called the African unicorn. So really, when we're talking about a leucistic okapi, they're really a unicorn of unicorns. So not only is Mzimu a rarity of his species, he very well could be the first and last golden okapi to ever exist. To wrap things up, let's talk more about the superstar shiny Pokemon that is Mzimu. So in 2021, Mzimu was born into a private facility in the United Arab Emirates, which was congested and wasn't really a good home for him. But thanks to Vantara, Mzimu has a new home in India where he has a lot more space to roam around. It seems like he's even got a girlfriend. And yes, female okapis are bigger than males. What I wouldn't do to be Forrest Galante right now with one of the rarest animals in the world. Well, if you didn't know, supersized mammals weren't just a thing in the Ice Age. They were all throughout the Cenozoic period. So why don't we take a look at some today? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Cenozoic Creatures Edition. And how could I talk about the Cenozoic without highlighting the woolly mammoth? Here's the thing though, not all mammoths were hairy, and some of them weren't even big. Because down south in North America, the not hairy Columbian mammoth got bigger than an African savanna elephant. Some mammoths even went out of their way to live the island life in the Mediterranean and shrunk down to the size of a Shetland pony. But let's turn the clock back a little bit, because this is a Chalicotherium, essentially a horse with ground sloth DLC, who used their claws to strip leaves from the trees. Oh yeah, and some of them had a dome head like Tylocephalonyx. Speaking of dome heads, giraffes even tried this out at one point before they got their long necks. Then again, giraffes were experimenting with a lot of head accessories. When I say a lot, I mean a lot. But we can get even weirder, as although this looks like a one-night stand between a hippo and a manatee, it is neither. This is a Desmostylion. And to add insult to injury, we had a wolf in sheep's clothing, Andrewsarchus, the largest land carnivore to ever exist. Except it didn't look like this. They probably looked more like entelodonts, aka hell pigs, except these were not pigs either. They were closer to hippos and whales. So should entelodonts be hell hippos then? And to wrap things up, let's talk about that time where before sloths went to the trees, they went to the seas. Because this is Thalassocnus, a marine ground sloth that ate seagrass. And while they were doing this, they had to worry about early sperm whales. So if you didn't know, most mammals by the end of the late Pleistocene had grown massive, and if they didn't get taller, they sure did get bulkier, such as with the short-faced kangaroo. But what other Cenozoic species should you know about? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Cenozoic Creatures Edition, Part 2. So I'm gonna be real with you, some of the largest mammals didn't come towards the end of the Pleistocene, they were way before, such as with the largest rhino to ever exist, Paraceratherium, which rivaled and towered most elephants. But before they reached the towering heights, they looked a lot more like horses, such as with Juchia. You know what? Speaking of horses, not even they were safe from the oddities of the Cenozoic, such as with Proboscidoparian, which looked like it had a taper-like trunk. However, in all reality, they probably had a fleshy nose, more like a moose. And oh dear, I shouldn't have said moose, because there was a stag moose, which had a lot more of an interesting set of antlers. But if you know about the Irish elk, that's not a surprise. But in my personal opinion, the one that takes the cake is the Chinese giant elk, Cynomegaloceros. But if we want to talk about headwear, one of the strangest was actually the earliest, Untatherium, which was not a rhino. And no, despite looking like a rhino, this is not a rhino either. This is Megacerops, a type of Brontotherium. No, this isn't a rhino either. This is a nodoungulate from South America, known as Toxodon, and it reminds me more of a hippo. As much as I would love to talk about early hippos, examples like Hexaprotodon don't surprise me. However, what does surprise me is how big a Hyrax has got, as this is Titanohyrax, and it weighed over 1,000 kilograms. Other honorable mentions include carnivorous armadillos, saber-tooths that were anything but cats, giant platypuses that had teeth, lemurs the size of gorillas, the tusked whales before narwhals that look more like walruses. So if you didn't know, the Ituri rainforest is a biodiversity hotspot within the Congo Basin, hosting a large variety of megafauna such as African forest elephants and okapis. But what other native animals should you know about? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Residents of the Ituri Rainforest Edition. So in the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion does not reside there. However, African buffalo do. Except they look a little bit different than their Black Death counterparts, because this is a Congo buffalo, a subspecies under the same animal. If you thought Pumbaa was a big pig, you haven't met the giant forest hog, as this is the largest wild pig species in the world, bigger than a wild boar. Although they do resemble warthogs a good bit, those bumps on their face are exclusive to males, as they're scent glands to mark territory. If you see a set of zebra stripes, you're actually looking at a giraffe, because okapis are the closest living relative to giraffes. Or, what do you know, it could be a bongo, a striped antelope species also found in this region. But not all antelope are big in the Ituri rainforest, as duikers also reside there, such as the yellowback duiker, blue duiker, even a wide duiker. If you're a birdwatcher, don't worry, you have over 435 options to choose from, including the national animal of the Congo, the Congo peafowl. And for all my fishing enthusiasts, you have plenty of options as well, such as giraffe catfish, elephant fish, spiny eels, and even a true river monster, the Goliath tigerfish. But let's go back to the land for a second, because you might stumble your eyes upon a ground pangolin, the largest pangolin species in the world. But while you're trekking around, make sure to keep an eye out in the trees, as African leopards are very prevalent here. However, they're not the only things you have to worry about, as there's also chimpanzees, olive baboons, and even the imposter in a Guardians of Ga'Hoole movie, the owl-faced monkey. For the grand finale, we gotta go big with the African forest elephant, as they are ecosystem engineers in their habitats, and they're not the same as their savanna cousins, as they diverged from them 5 to 6 million years ago, the same distance of time that splits us from chimpanzees. So if you didn't know, ever since the early days of Earth, arthropods have had some very interesting builds, such as sea scorpions. So then what's next? We had tree lobsters that... Oh wait. We still do. It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Tree Lobster Edition. So let me go on ahead and say it. Tree lobsters aren't lobsters, as they're officially known as the Lord Howe Island stick insect. And I bet you'll never guess where we found them. We found them on Lord Howe Island, a small island off the coast of Australia. And if you know anything about island life, you know that small animals get big, and Lord Howe Island stick insects can get up to 5 inches long. You know what? I'm glad that's as big as they can get, because Earth has a history of making big bugs. Let's circle back around to mainland Larry. When these bugs were first discovered in the 1960s, the first specimens were past tense. In fact, pretty much all of them we found were past tense. But why? Well, it's theorized that sometime during the 1930s, they all died out, and it was because of ship rats, because Remy decided it would be a good idea to go and make lobster bisque on his vacation. So if we didn't find any alive on Lord Howe Island, where did we find them? We found them in the strangest of places, on a small volcanic peak known as Ball's Pyramid, off the coast of that island. So the story goes that in 2001, researchers went to this volcanic peak, and while looking around, they found insect droppings, which led them to a single tea bush, housing all of the last surviving members of this unique species. So if you didn't know, Australia isn't just red desert. It has a variety of different ecoregions within it. And the one I think people don't talk about enough is the world's oldest rainforest is found here. Let's talk about it. It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Residents of the Daintree Rainforest Edition. So this is the Daintree Rainforest, a rainforest that has been around since the early Cretaceous, 135 million years ago. So back then, you might have been able to see a Muttaburrasaurus, Queensland's state fossil. Other notable creatures from the past include giant wallabies and even a giant platypus, Obdurodon. The question remains, what does this rainforest look like today? Well, even in the modern day, this rainforest has a dinosaur of its own, the southern cassowary, a relative to ostriches and emus. But if I were you, I wouldn't get that close, as those talons on its feet have been known to slice a man open. Zookeepers have to have riot shields to deal with them. Not only are there modern dinosaurs, there be dragons here too, as this is Boyd's forest dragon, an arboreal lizard species found in this rainforest. But it's not the dragons you have to worry about, it's the largest crocodilian species in the world, the saltwater crocodile. And now we can move on to the mammals such as the spectacled flying fox, a large megabat that eats fruit, and also the blossoms of eucalyptus trees. But that's not the only mammals you'll find in the trees. Other notable ones include the striped possum, the spotted-tailed or tiger quoll, which is a carnivorous marsupial, and if you're lucky enough, you might find the Bennett's tree kangaroo, one of the most elusive tree kangaroo species. And speaking of kangaroos, this is a musky rat kangaroo, one of the most primitive macropod species on the continent, and it is unique because it walks on all fours. Not only will you find marsupials and bats in these regions, you'll also find monotremes such as the echidna and the platypus. Now, let's circle back to birds for a second because you won't just find cassowaries. There's over 430 species found in this region, which makes up more than half of all the bird species found on the continent, and one of the most colorful is the wampu fruit dove. And to finish off, I think we should bug out because there's a variety of insect species, but my personal favorite is the Hercules moth, which can have a wingspan of up to 9 inches. So if you didn't know, emperor penguins are the biggest penguin species in the modern day, reaching heights of 4 feet, the size of a 6-year-old child, and up to 100 pounds. But the question remains, who really is the biggest bird of them all? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Biggest Bird Edition. For those of you who want the straight and simple answer, that's easy, it's the ostrich. But the largest subspecies of ostrich is the North African or red-necked ostrich. But if you thought that was the whole video, my friend, you're sadly mistaken. Because we're going to take a little trip around the world, starting with North America, and the largest bird here is the California condor, a critically endangered condor species. But if you think that's big, you should see its South American counterpart, the Andean condor. There's a bird that's even greater than the Andean condor, the greater rhea, South America's answer to ostriches and emus. And since Europe doesn't have any ratites, the great bustard is the largest of them all there. When it comes to Asia, you gotta be a little more specific. Height-wise, the Saurus crane is the tallest flying bird not only in Asia, but in the entire world. If you're talking about wingspan, it's a toss-up between the Dalmatian pelican and the Steller sea eagle. Believe it or not, the heaviest is the southern cassowary, because you can find them in remote parts of Indonesia. Moving down south to the land down under, when it comes to flying, the largest is the Australian pelican. But on the ground, the back-to-back champs, the emu, reign supreme. And in Africa, the biggest bird is the Kori bustard. And there's a reason why I left the Antarctic for last, because the largest flying bird in the world is found here. The snowy, or also known as the wandering albatross. So if you didn't know, a giant panda, a takin, a golden snub-nosed monkey, and a crested ibis all share something in common. And what do they have in common? That's right, their home range in the Qinling Mountains in China. But what other residents should you know about? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Residents of the Qinling Mountains edition. So first up, let's talk about the unique subspecies of panda exclusive to this mountain range, the Qinling panda, which diverged 300,000 years ago from regular giant pandas. And sometimes they come out a special brown color because of a gene called BACE2. Now, speaking of pandas that have a different color, red pandas can also be found in this region. But where there's plenty of herbivores, there's also carnivores such as golden jackals, clouded leopards, moon bears, also known as the Asiatic black bear, and even a critically endangered subspecies of leopard, the North Chinese leopard. And although you might not think it, reptile diversity is high in these mountain ranges, but usually in between 1,700 and 2,200 meters, with reptiles such as the Chinese blue-tailed skink and the Sichuan rat snake. where there's reptiles, you'll find amphibians such as the Tibetan stream salamander, various species of frogs, and if you're lucky enough, maybe even the world's largest amphibian, the Chinese giant salamander. But if you want to know who takes the cake for biodiversity in these regions, it's birds, including some like the black stork and even the beautiful golden pheasant, along with many other species. Arguably, some of the most interesting things here are the insects, such as the aquatic stoneflies, and even numerous species of scorpion flies. But don't worry, they can't hurt people, because those stingers don't sting, they use them to mate. So if you didn't know, our favorite saber-toothed squirrel, Scrat, from fiction, isn't just fiction. Because in 2011, a mammal fossil was discovered in Argentina from the late Cretaceous, Cronopio. But what other Cretaceous mammals should you know about? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Mammals of the Mesozoic Edition. And if we're going to talk about early mammals, we have to talk about one that hunted dinosaurs. That's right, Rapenamammus is a genus of early mammals that would hunt Psittacosaurus, and one species got up to the size of a badger. But before mammals could even think about hunting dinosaurs, they had to start out super small, such as with Morganucodon, a small early mammal from the late Triassic to the mid-Jurassic that was about the size of a shrew. And if you thought those two were impressive, let's talk about the jaw power of Didelphodon, an early mammal from late Cretaceous North America. Relative to its body size, it has one of the strongest bite forces of any known mammal, and it was about the size of an otter. Now that we've talked about individual species, let's talk about a group that gets overshadowed in most media, multituberculates. Well, what makes them special? I'm glad you asked, because look at that blade-shaped premolar on the bottom jaw. Unlike a lot of mammals in the modern day which can chew side to side, multituberculates could only chew back and forth, and it caused a slicing motion, not a crushing and chewing. Not only did they have shearing teeth, but they also had venomous spurs, similar to that of male platypuses. And although these mammals are gone now, they reached their peak diversity at the end of the late Cretaceous all the way up until the Paleocene, with some estimates guessing they made 15 to 25% of all mammal species alive. That's comparable to bats and rodents in the modern day. If these shearing beasts were still around, I would imagine things would look very, very different to what we have today. So if you didn't know, Hafthor Bjornsson is one of the strongest men on Earth, having a deadlift of over 505 kilograms. And for my Americans out there, that's over 1,100 pounds. But if you guys know me, I talk about animals, not weightlifters. So, it's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Species of Strength Edition. And if we're going to talk about a strong animal, let's address the elephant in the room. Although elephants can haul up to 18,000 pounds, unfortunately, their strength is taken advantage of in a lot of East Asian countries, and I do not condone this kind of behavior. But there are some ethical ways elephants use their strength to their advantage, primarily in their trunk. It has over 150,000 muscles inside of it, and it can uproot trees, but it's also delicate enough to pick up a single blade of grass. And you know who doesn't get enough credit? The largest animal in history, the blue whale. Let me just put it this way. If you're an unlucky person who falls off a ship and gets hit by this whale's tail, that's about 60,000 newtons or 13,500 pounds of force coming down on you all at once. And it's all thanks to a special muscle in their body known as the peduncle, which connects the tail flute to the rest of its body, making it the strongest muscle of any animal, which isn't surprising, but still. And if we're going to talk about leg day, we have to downsize a little bit with this one, as the dung beetle has the strongest legs of any animal compared to body size, being able to lift over 1,100 times their body weight. And to put that into perspective, if a person had that kind of strength, one man would be able to pull 6 double-decker buses all at once.
So if you didn't know, snow leopards are not true leopards, and their closest living relatives are tigers? Huh, I didn't realize Tai Lung and tigers were cousins, but let's talk about it. It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Snow Leopard Edition. But before we talk about snow leopards specifically, let's zoom out on the lens a little bit.
Yes, snow leopards are a part of the big cats, aka Panthera, but the thing is, you can see just how genetically distant snow leopards are from true leopards and how they're closer to tigers. And as for tigers, sometime between 2.7 and 3.7 million years ago in the late Pleistocene, that's when they diverged. And if you look over here, they're not closely related to clouded leopards either. Thank God for cladograms. But enough about taxonomy, let's get back to the superstar of this episode. Snow leopards live a solitary lifestyle, and most of that time is spent hunting animals like blue sheep and tahr. That is unless you're a mother, as female snow leopards will raise their cubs for up to 2 years before they send them out on their own. And trust me, they need all the help they can get surviving this kind of harsh environment, as they reside in the mountain ranges of Central and South Asia, which includes the Himalayas. The question remains, how do snow leopards live in the snowy mountains? And for starters, well, their ability to pounce, as their front legs are actually shorter than their back legs, giving them this ability to be like a spring and launch themselves towards prey, about 30 feet forward in one direction. Not only can they pounce, they can also walk over snow with ease, as their paws are essentially built-in snowshoes, allowing for easy traversing across the snow. Up next is one of the most overlooked adaptations, their nose. They have enlarged nasal cavities to breathe in the cold, frigid air and warm it up before it goes into their lungs. And lastly, arguably the most famous, their camouflage. Go on ahead, tell me where it's at on the picture. They're so good at camouflage, they're known as the ghost of the mountains. And to wrap things up, if you're looking to teach your kids about snow leopards and other cool endangered animals, look no further than the Education subscription service. And although I wasn't able to get their subscription box for December, I did get the one for last month, the Okapi. What did I get last month? Well, I got this cute little painting canvas of a baby Okapi, along with watercolor crayons, this cute little patch of an Okapi, and these ecosystem stickers that came along with this poster, and of course, your monthly plushie. This is what you'll get all this month, but hurry, because New Year's Eve is the last day to get it. So if you didn't know, Happy New Year. No, really, Happy New Year, as new is another common name for the wildebeest, an antelope species found in Africa. But what else should you know about wildebeest? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation New Year edition. Now you're probably wondering, what else is there to them other than the fact that they ran over Mufasa? Well, for starters, there's 2 different species. The most common of the 2 species is the common or blue wildebeest, having its horns extend out to the side and upward and having a bluish gray color. Whereas with the black wildebeest, their fur tends to be darker and their horns face forward and up, and they also have this nose mohawk thing going on. And here's the thing, wildebeest don't just come in black and blue, they also come in blonde. And even more rare than that, sometimes piebald. But what really makes them special? Well, for starters, you can see how many there are. Blue wildebeest in particular make up a herd of 1.5 million animals that are a part of the annual Masai Mara migration from Tanzania to Kenya. And this migration that they do every year is no easy feat. It is an 800-kilometer round loop that they do. And here's the sad truth. 1 out of every 6 wildebeest do not make it to the end, as they have to worry about not drowning in rivers, being eaten by crocodiles, being mauled by lions, ganged up on by a pack of hyenas, and even a danger you may not expect, safari tours. Because of the rising demand every year for safari tours, the more trucks there are, the more there are in the way that block these migration routes that are so important for the wildebeest. So before you go and book a safari for this annual migration, make sure you look into some alternatives like hot air balloon safaris. And if you are going to be on the ground, make sure to use a guide who will respect the animals. So if you didn't know, yesterday was World Rhino Day, but I still think we should celebrate, because 24 years ago, this Sumatran rhinoceros, Andalis, made history, being the first Sumatran rhino born in captivity in over 100 years. Let's talk about it. That's right, it's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Rhino Conservation Edition. But before we can talk about how he made history, we have to go back into history, aka 1984 in Singapore, where a conference was held to discuss the future of this declining rhinoceros species. And in the end, an agreement was made to capture wild rhinos to bring them into captivity, to study them and give them a better chance to reproduce. Now I know what you're thinking, why would we have to capture these rhinos and bring them into captivity to help them breed? Well, take a look at their range in the modern day. It's the red dots on the bottom, not the yellow, I promise. Because of how fragmented the populations were, and still are, that was the main reason that they brought these rhinos into captivity. And during the course of this 11-year project, there were definitely some bumps in the road, such as an export ban on rhinos from Malaysia to other countries, as well as, out of the 47 rhinos that were captured, only 6 offspring were born in this entire project. So then, the project was a failure, right? Well, no, because it gave us a better understanding of why this particular rhino was so complicated to breed in captivity. And the biggest challenge that these rhinos face is actually reproducing, because if they don't do it enough, they can get ovarian cancer. Not only were they having reproductive problems, they were being super picky about how their habitat was, as well as their diet, because it was unlike other rhino species that we have more research on. It didn't look very good for the rhinos with all the issues they were having in captivity, but then came along Dr. Terry Roth, the president of Conservation and Science at the Cincinnati Zoo. Dr. Terry Roth spent a lot of time researching and analyzing the rhinos, and she made a lot of breakthroughs about their behavior, diet, and their reproductive processes. Her scientific discoveries were so crucial to these rhinos that her work eventually paid off, as in September 13th, 2001, Andalis was finally born, the first Sumatran rhino born in captivity anywhere in the world for the first time in 112 years. So in turn, this story isn't just about Andalis and other Sumatran rhinos, but it's also about the people who put their heart and soul into saving them. So if you didn't know, there are 5 living rhino species in the world, and the smallest and the hairiest title would go to the Sumatran rhinoceros. But what else should you know about these hairy little guys? It's time for you to get your daily dose of Edzucation, Sumatran Rhino Edition. If the nickname didn't give it away, they're the closest living rhino species to woolly rhinos and the lesser-known Stephanorhinus. And if we don't do something about it, they could very well end up like their ancestors with only 80 individuals left in the wild. Like other rhino species, they're poached for their horns, but also suffer from habitat loss due to the extraction of palm oil in their natural habitat. And conservation efforts can be a little mixed, as if females don't reproduce, they are susceptible to ovarian cancer and other reproductive problems. And because their population is so scattered, they have trouble finding each other during the mating season. But there is hope for these guys, as the last Sumatran rhino in the US, Harapan at the Cincinnati Zoo, was sent to Indonesia for this exact reason. And he made his contribution by siring a calf named Indra, a healthy baby male. So these rhinos are definitely singing a song of hope. And speaking of, Sumatran rhinos do sing, also being called a whale due to the similarity in sound to whales. So if you didn't know, a lot of animals have adaptations for cold weather, but there are some that you may not expect. And it's not as crazy as you think to see a lion in the snow. So let's talk about it. Welcome back to another episode of the Creature Conversation, Cold Weather Adaptation Edition. So yeah, this shouldn't make any sense why a lion is so comfortable in the cold, until you realize lions from our Ice Age past are pretty used to cold weather, living in colder climates such as Eurasia and North America. And the winter coats that they possessed reflect in modern lions today. But it's not just lions that actually have winter coats. Spotted hyenas, brown hyenas, leopards, and tigers can all possess winter coats. Even other species like red pandas that you don't typically associate with snow are pretty used to it because of their alpine climates in China. And although most bears are cold tolerant, spectacled bears aren't usually associated with snow. also being known as the Andean bear, the Andes Mountains in South America are one of the coldest regions on the continent, and this is where they call home. So the next time you go out to a zoo or other animal-related facility, you might be surprised what you could see.
So if you didn't know, giant anteaters are a lot of things, and insectivore being one of them. It's pretty obvious because of the name, anteater. But what else should you know about the Harry Hoover vacuum cleaner? Well, let's talk about it. It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Giant Anteater Edition. For starters, giant anteaters are what we call xenarthrans, which is a superorder of mammals from South America, which also includes sloths and armadillos. And before you ask, no, aardvarks and pangolins are not xenarthrans. But enough about their family history. Let's take a look at some of their physical features, like that bushy tail. What does it do exactly? Well, it turns out they use it as a blanket, but not just for sleeping. They also use it for camouflage to hide their pups and keep themselves safe from predators. And if a predator like a jaguar decides to take a chance on an anteater, they think twice because of one particular reason. Yeah, these are anteater claws, and they can get up to 4 inches long, and they keep them razor sharp by walking on their knuckles, and they're sharp enough to cut through solid rock to get to termite mounds. And with claws like that, what do you think happens when a cross between Edward Scissorhands and Naughty Nunu decides he ain't the one? Mountain lions, dogs, and yes, people all get put on a shirt to be remembered by. But here's the thing, giant anteaters aren't inherently aggressive. They're actually rather shy and timid, but they will let you know when they're distressed by using a sound. Yes, they make sound, but you're not gonna like this. To wrap things up, let's talk about how this excavator of eusocial insects extracts the good stuff out of a termite mound. Rather than having teeth like most mammals, giant anteaters have a 2-foot long tongue that they use to scoop up all the ants and termites that they want. And once they swallow them whole and use specialized stomach chambers to grind them up. So if you didn't know, I owe this rather robust ratite quite the apology because I never seem to get their name right. Because this is an emu, the second largest flightless bird in the entire world. But what else should you know about them? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Emu, not Emu edition. Now to backtrack, yes, emus are what we call ratites, a group of large flightless birds that include ostriches, cassowaries, rheas, and of course, emus. While they may not have the fierce reputation that some of their family members have, it's probably best if you leave this dino bird alone during breeding season or if it's protecting its eggs. Because trust me, humans had to find out the hard way before back in the 1930s in what they called the Great Emu War. During a wildlife management operation in 1932, soldiers from the Royal Australian Artillery were tasked to cull 20,000 emus, and they were given machine guns, and they still lost because they found out emus can apparently dodge bullets. And I don't know about you, but anything that will stand up to a beefed up boxer bunny, I want nothing to do with. And the only thing that can make them drastically Jurassic is when they are bald, because apparently emus can have a genetic condition that make them bald, which happened to 2 emu chicks during 2025 at a farm in Florida. So in reality, Jurassic Park really just has beefed up super chickens. Y'all ain't slick. So if you didn't know, quokkas, although looking like the happiest animal on the planet, are probably some of the worst mothers in the animal kingdom. Because when a predator comes along, the mother has a secret survival tactic, ejecting the joey from the pouch and making a run for it. But hey, I guess you can always start over, make another kid, right? So then, who are some of the better mothers in the animal kingdom? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Best Mothers in Nature Edition. Starting off strong, a mother humpback whale will lose up to 1/3 of her body weight because she fasts while feeding her calf and migrating thousands of miles to the next destination. And while doing this, she has to keep her calf safe from many threats in the ocean, especially killer whales. Another strong contender are orangutans because moms will raise their babies for 7 to 9 years before they leave the nest, teaching them essential survival skills.
Me personally, I think elephants take the cake in the mammal department because they can have a pregnancy for almost 2 years and will nurse their calves in between 3 all the way up to 10 years after having them. To wrap things up, I'll say velvet spiders are probably the best mothers in the animal kingdom, but for a dark reason. Velvet spiders participate in what we call matrophagy, and what that is the mother sacrifices herself and the babies eat her alive. Now, I don't know if Charlotte was a velvet spider, but I have a strong suspicion they may not be as innocent as you think they are.
So if you didn't know, this is not a turkey, but rather a capercaillie. And despite having turkey in the name, brush turkeys are not true turkeys either. But something they do share in common with turkeys are all being galliforms, or what we know as landfowl. But what else should you know about them? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Fowl Familiarization Edition. So to explain what a galliform or landfowl is, it's a group of birds that are mostly terrestrial and spend most of their lives on the ground. And while they can fly, they don't always do it very well. And the word galliform itself actually translates to chicken-like, which is suiting because chickens are a part of this order of birds. Chickens are only one part of this order of birds, as there's 5 separate families, so let's go through them together. Up first, we have to go to the land down under to talk about the first family, megapodes, also known as mound builders, which include brush turkeys. And if you're wondering why they're called mound birds, they can build nests that are up to 1.5 meters high and 4 meters across to incubate their eggs. But not every bird in this family builds their mounds the same way, as some species like the Maleo will build mounds out of volcanic ash. Up next we have Crassidae, or what I like to call crazy name birds, that span from Trinidad all the way up to Texas, and this includes birds such as curassows, guans, and even chachalacas. And you would think with a name like chachalaca they would look crazy, but they look surprisingly normal. However, they are very, very loud. To dive things down a little bit, let's talk about our third family, the New World quail. New World quail can be found in the Americas, while Old World quail can be found in Europe, Africa, and Asia, and have been genetically distant for about 50 million years. The duality of quail, am I right? And a group of quail are not called a flock, but rather they're called a covey, which consists about 10 to 30 birds. Jumping back to Old World quail, they only play a small part in the next family, Phasianidae, which has a broad cast of characters. Pheasants in particular are probably the most interesting in my opinion, as they can come in a wide variety of colors, such as the golden pheasant. And surprisingly, peacocks may not be the biggest show-offs in this family. Because sometimes it's not the plumage, but it's the wattle that counts, such as Temnix tragopan. And despite looking like a pheasant and acting like a pheasant, guinea fowl are not a part of this family. They have their own separate family, making up the last of the 5. But when you're as annoying as a flock of guinea fowl altogether, I can see why they are separate on the family tree. So if you didn't know, if you thought this was a goose, that's the wrong answer. Get it? Answer as in goose, like the scientific. Okay, never mind. But what they are a part of being in the order Anseriformes, or what we call waterfowl. But what else should you know about them? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation, Fowl Familiarization Edition, Part 2. So who is this anonymous aquatic avian? Well, this is a magpie goose, and despite the name, it's not either. But they are closer to geese, and they inhabit southern New Guinea and northern Australia. And unlike most waterfowl, they're not 100% migratory. Something else notable to know about this not a goose is the goose egg on its head, along with the fact that it's the only surviving member of its family. This is only one bird that makes up the entirety of waterfowl, so let's talk about the other 2 families. When it comes to a family reunion, screamers, being the second family, might look a little out of place at first. But because of their beak shape, it was originally thought that they were closer to chickens and turkeys, but when you see their natural habitat in South American wetlands, it makes a little more sense. Except for maybe the horned screamer, aka the unicorn bird, because that is just terrifying. But another reason screamers look so out of place is because they're the most primitive of all waterfowl in the modern day. And here's the kicker, their closest relatives were some of the biggest birds to ever walk on Earth, like Gastornis.
Despite what outdated paleo media will tell you, Gastornis was not a terror bird, and it was rather a vegetarian. And now we can get to the good stuff with our last family, Anatidae, which includes ducks, geese, and swans, along with a few other honorable mentions I'd like to share. Such as the smallest waterfowl in the world, the African pygmy goose, which is not a goose, but rather a perching duck. Or how about shelducks, probably the most underrated waterfowl, because they're not ducks, but they're more an intermediate between duck and goose. If we want to go big, let's talk about the world's largest waterfowl, the trumpeter swan, but they almost went out with a bang in the 1930s, with only 70 individuals left in the wild. Thanks to extensive conservation efforts, tens of thousands of them exist today. Whenever you think of South America, the first thing that may come to mind are the vast tropical jungles such as the Amazon rainforest. But what if I told you South America is also home to the world's most biodiverse savanna, the Cerrado? But what else should you know about the Cerrado and its residents? It's time for another episode of the Creature Conversation Wildlife of the Cerrado edition. But before we talk fauna in this forgotten savanna, let us talk about the flora, as the Cerrado is also known as the upside down forest, as 70% of its biomass is underground, consisting mostly of roots. Not only is your roots running deep special, but it also helps these plants survive in a dry, fire-prone environment. But now, let's go on ahead and put the creature in creature conversation. While the Cerrado is not as mega in megafauna, the Cerrado also has their own big five just like Africa. But in particular, let's talk about the forgotten two of the big five in the Cerrado, such as the giant armadillo, which is the largest armadillo species in the entire world. And for reference, they can get about as big as a large dog and can grow longer than the world's biggest tortoises. But despite being as big as they are, we know very little about them because they're mostly nocturnal. But what we do know is that they're very important ecosystem engineers in this habitat. Adding insult to injury on mysterious mammals, let's talk about maned wolves, or what I like to call stilt shepherds. Despite being called a wolf and looking like a fox, they're their own unique species within the canine family. And apparently they're so iconic they even have a fruit named after them, known as the wolf's apple. And mammals are not the only big players here, statistically and quite literally, as birds like the giant rhea also reside in this region. As a matter of fact, over 850 different species reside in this region, with 30 plus of them being endemic, like the Brazilian merganser. Shifting from waterfowl to under the water, let's talk about the fish, as the fish in the Cerrado make up 27% of all 3,000 species on the entire continent, such as killifish. And out of all the reptiles and amphibians, I think the giant worm lizard deserves a spotlight here, but not for the way you think it should be. Because its scientific name, Amphibiana, is actually based on a two-headed serpent-like creature that eats ants.
You know, I asked a zookeeper a simple question. Out of every animal that they've worked with or were just interested in general, which one they thought deserved the spotlight the most that normally doesn't get a lot of attention? And the answer I got today was the blue duiker. And if you don't know what a duiker is, it's a small group of bovid antelopes that live in Central and Western Africa. And the blue duiker happens to be the smallest of all of the species. So let's talk about them. When I say blue duikers are small, I mean they're really small. Like they don't get bigger than a large house cat small. But they use this to their advantage, using the tall grass and other foliage in their natural habitat to hide themselves. And if they are caught out in the open, you can reference it in their name as to what they do, because the word dike actually means to dive. They dive into the brush to get away from predators, that way they cannot see them. Now let's get into some of the behaviors that blue duikers possess. For starters, they're crepuscular animals, which means they're most active at dawn and dusk. And as for their diet, they're actually omnivorous, although most of what they eat is plant matter. For example, they follow the wake of birds and monkeys to find fallen fruit from the animals leaving and making the fruit fall down from the canopy. And duikers will not say no to free food. But when they do need to pack on some protein, sometimes they'll eat small invertebrates and reptiles and even smaller mammals. But this isn't the first time that we've seen this recorded in small hoof stock. And like other mammals of the same size, blue duikers have a very fast reproductive rate, as females will have a calf every single year, and a baby blue duiker will reach full size in 6 months. But before the baby carriage, we have to talk about marriage, and in blue duikers, they're monogamous animals, which mean they mate for life. They're ride or die, and they will even work together to fight off other pairs of blue duikers to keep their territory. So now you know a little bit more about blue duikers. So if you didn't know, clouded leopards, although being called the modern-day saber-tooth, are not closer related to Smilodon than any other big cat in the modern day. They're pretty distant, actually. In fact, there are some other rather common misconceptions between the relationship of extant versus extinct animals. So let's go on ahead and talk about it. For example, cassowaries, although being called dinobirds, are no closer than any other bird in their relationship to avian dinosaurs. Because of their large and agile nature, you might naturally think they're related to terror birds, but this is also not true, as terror birds are actually related to the South American Sariema. And Sariemas can be terrifying in their own right, as they have sickle claws like raptors. One that I especially see a lot are entelodonts, as they're often called hell pigs, but they're not closest related to pigs at all, but rather another terrifying animal, as they're closest related to hippos, which honestly does not surprise me in the slightest. And as for the American cheetah, it's not a cheetah at all, but rather a close relative to the mountain lion. But truth be told, mountain lions and cheetahs are the closest living relatives to one another. And to wrap things up, one that I do not see enough are sea scorpions, because despite this name, they are also not related to scorpions in the slightest. Wouldn't you know it, they're related to the absolute GOAT of surviving mass extinctions, horseshoe crabs. I think that video right there might be the result of somebody watching Racing Stripes too many times, because having a zebra in captivity is one of the worst ideas that you could possibly have. Let's go into the reasons why you should not own a zebra. First things first, zebras are the last member of the horse family that you want to piss off royally. And I say that because although they are related to our domesticated horses, they are definitely more ass than horse, not just figuratively either. Number 2, zebras were born to fight from the very beginning. Because when you grow up in the African savanna and you have a multitude of predators hunting you down, you have to know how to fight back. Not only will they fight back, they will bite back. Because if you take a closer look at the teeth on a stallion zebra, they have canine teeth. And because of those teeth right there, multiple zookeepers have been injured, in addition to somebody getting their arm amputated. Have you guys ever heard of a dinosaur that looks like Stegosaurus but has a long neck similar to sauropods? Because if you haven't, this is Miragaia, a stegosaurid from the late Jurassic of Portugal, and has been made popular by the game Path of Titans. But let's talk more about it in this episode of Obscure Oddities in Prehistory. So for starters, the dinosaur itself actually got its name from a hilly subdivision in a city known as Porto, and the subdivision itself is, you guessed it, Miragaia. But the word Miragaia itself actually translates to Wonderful Goddess of the Earth. And in all honesty, I think that's way cooler than a translation for Roof Lizard. But that's besides the point. Miragaia was actually a pretty advanced stegosaur for the time, all thanks to the vertebrae in its neck. And unlike us mammals who only have 7, including giraffes, Miragaia had a whopping 17. That's more neck vertebrae than some sauropod dinosaurs. But it's not the number of neck vertebrae that's astounding, it's how they evolve them. As usually whenever animals want to get a longer neck, they do it one of 2 ways. Either stretching out their neck vertebrae that they already have, or evolving more, but in the case of Miragaia, several of its backbones shifted forward, becoming part of the neck to make it longer. And you would think talking about a stegosaur we'd be able to talk more about the ornamentation on its back half, but the sad reality is, we know nothing but neck because the entire back half of the dinosaur was destroyed during road construction.
Oh, God. Ron, where's my legs? Where are my legs?
But what we can do is speculate, and part of that speculation includes the fact that Miragaia might have spent some of its time on its hind legs, reaching up into the trees with that extended neck to be able to browse, not to compete with other dinosaurs in the area.